Hello and welcome into today's live broadcast. And let's see, today's what? The Saturday, August the 12th, 2017. And I have a lot of different topics to cover, so I'm doing these individual live vlogs, if you will, because it's just a lot faster than going through the whole video creation and editing process. So we're doing this for a little while. We'll see how this works out. Welcome everybody, and thanks for joining me. And as the title says in the top of the name of the video, we'll talk about data destruction and data recovery. It seems like people either want to get their data back and they want to know how, or they want to get rid of a hard drive or get rid of a computer and they want to make sure no one can ever recover the data. So that's the topic for today. Of course, if you have a question related to data backup, recovery, restoration, go ahead and put it there in the live chat. If you're watching live, you can't leave a comment. There's only a chat room. If you're watching this after it is aired live, then you can't comment in the chat room. You can leave a comment below the video. That's how you can tell if you're watching live. It seems a lot of people can't tell the difference. So that's one way you can tell, apart from just simply looking at the date and time on the video. So I want to clear up that confusion right there. Also, a good friend of mine has a YouTube channel I've featured in the past called MercoMods, and he does some really cool custom PC builds. And he doesn't really go through detail on how to build, but he kind of gives you a 4.5 minute, under a 5 minute video of the entire process of cutting and painting and gluing. So his latest build is in the notes below the video. I highly recommend you check it out. It's he always does really cool, unique stuff. You just don't see builds because it's custom. You really don't see anything like it. They're just one-off builds that he does, and he just enjoys doing it. So be sure and check out MercoMods' channel. He's been sort of dormant since I featured him. Life happens. And now he's back and better and stronger than ever with the latest build, and really doesn't focus on the CPU. It doesn't focus on the RAM. It's all about the mods and the imagination of the design and how he goes about executing that, which is just a pleasure to watch. And it's always just done to music. There's no voiceover narration or anything like that. So be sure and check that out. And I'm just looking over here on the chat. Say hello to everybody. We've got 147 people in there, and we're just getting started, so welcome everybody. A lot of people like to ask me when certain videos are coming out. When's a repair video coming out? When's a build video coming out? There's no schedule for these videos. They're done because YouTube does not pay enough. There aren't enough of you guys watching that I can make this a full-time job. I hope that'll change in the future. So builds, repairs, or whatever the topic of the video is, happens as those jobs come in. Right now I'm working on a private build video, and then in between doing that, I'm doing these because I have to keep something happening on my YouTube channel, or you think I went away, when in fact I'm working on another project. So I'm splitting my time between that project as well as trying to keep the content fresh here, as well as trying to cover a lot of different topics. I don't just want a channel of builds. Well, many of you would like that. Even more of you would hate it. And I don't want a channel of repairs because, well, many of you would like that. Many more would hate it. And I don't want a channel about, you see where this is going. So I'm trying to just balance everything out. You can tell from the title of the video if it's something you're interested in. And if not, wait for the next one and see if that one you're interested in, because what you're not interested in, other people are. So do please have consideration for those folks, and do know that these videos come to you at my cost. They cost you nothing. So the content that you're receiving is completely free, and I just hope you appreciate that and not start demanding certain kinds of videos, because that doesn't sit well with me. I will say, when someone contributes a large sum of money and wants a video, I'll probably do it. But that's just because, like I said, I do want to make YouTube my primary source of income. That would be my ultimate goal, but at this point, it's not even halfway. I mean, it's far from halfway where I need it to be. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, finding a variety of different topics, and then we'll see where it goes. Hopefully it'll continue to grow. I hope you guys continue to support the channel by sharing the videos and, put links in Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, I don't care, whatever, just to get more people aware of it that you think would enjoy them. Because there's no money to spend for commercials or marketing billboards around town, as much as I would love to do that. So, what else do we have going on here in the chat? Let's see. I had an SSD die. All right, well, let's get talking about that. That's why we're here, to talk about data destruction, data recovery. Someone had just asked if I had a Patreon account for contributing. I had one, but I've abandoned it. I know in the super chat you can contribute through the super chat that's active right now on this video. I'm not, while financial contributions are appreciated, there's certainly there's going to need to be an awful lot of that consistently for YouTube to be my main source of income. So you would be better served, I think, posting links to the videos that are your favorites on my channel to the favorite places you go, whether they're special groups, special interest groups, forums, on numerous platforms. So that's, I think, what's going to grow the channel most. And we're going to talk about SSDs. Somebody's saying SanDisk SSDs are garbage. I've used numerous SanDisk SSDs. I haven't seen an SSD fail from any brand. Clearly, if any brand was ridiculously unreliable, they would be out of business and there would be huge class action lawsuits for the data loss. So no manufacturer of SSDs has endured that I'm aware of, although some manufacturers have been bought out. Companies like OCZ are now owned by other companies because of their financial difficulties. But I think that was more about marketing than it was about whether or not the product was quality or not. I still have OCZ SSDs at my client's office that have been running strong now 4 or 5 years, no problems. So the question a lot of people, or the common myth that people have, is that solid state drives cannot be recovered. And it's absolutely not true. Solid state drive data recovery does exist, as does M.2 data recovery, and as does flash drive and memory card data recovery. That all exists. In fact, I did an interview about 1.5 years ago, and I never posted it. And the reason I didn't post it was because the interview goes, I've got about 2.5 hours of interview footage, and I need to whittle that down to about 30 minutes, and it's a lot of work, and I just haven't had time. But the interview is with a gentleman named Brian Cometa, and Brian has a data recovery service in Los Angeles, and it's called $300 Data Recovery, or 300DDR.com. Right, just as you have DDR RAM. So DDR is dollar data recovery, 300DDR.com. And he is the absolute cheapest data recovery service I have ever known. And what surprises me the most is where he's located. He's about 4 miles away from Rodeo Drive. And when you look out the window of his business, you see Maseratis and all kinds of exotic cars. It's a very... The place he's in isn't very expensive, but he's just a block away from all these, super high-end Bel Air, Beverly Hills, Rodeo Drive, just really super high-end area. And for him to be like the cheapest, I would expect the cheapest to be located somewhere in Nebraska or somewhere in the Midwest. And what he does is he offers data recovery services for whatever you need. If it's a laptop drive, solid state drive, M.2, flash drive, RAID array that went bad, fires, floods, he can do all of it. However, there are some jobs he can't do. Out of, I'd say, I think he said 80% of the drives they get in, they can successfully recover. And the other 20% are either too far gone for data recovery or need to be sent to those more traditional on track and other places that they disassemble the drive. So the problem is the data recovery services traditionally charge you the disassemble the drive price, even though most of the time the drive does not have to be disassembled. It doesn't have to be opened in a clean room. And Brian actually has, it's not a clean room. It's actually I forget what it's called, but it's a glass case. And the glass case is sealed, and you're able to open it and put a drive in there and close the case and stick your hands in and be able to, I guess it's with gloves, and you're able to work on the drive in a clean room environment, but it's only, this big. And that's all you need, right? You don't need an entire clean room to open up 3.5-inch hard drives or 2.5-inch drives. And there he can do head swaps. He's got a Facebook page where he's shown numerous photos of doing head swaps on different drives. The tour of his facility was very impressive. And I almost feel like it's too late to edit the video now because so much time has passed. It almost feels a little insulting to go and post it now. He's going to be like, wow, I totally forgot I did that interview. But he showed me around the whole shop, and he had a Samsung SSD there wired up doing data recovery. And then that's when I had this, he and I had this discussion about, I was told data recovery on SSDs wasn't possible. Well, there's one going right in front of your face. And I go, oh, it must be some other, clearly that's not a Samsung drive. And he's like, oh yeah, that's a Samsung 960. And I was like, wow, I've never seen one bad before. He says, yeah, he's had a couple come in. And other brands as well. Just so happened that at the time I was there doing the interview, he was doing a data recovery on a Samsung SSD. And you could see the progress moving across the monitor as it was cycling through the sectors on the drive. And we talked a little bit about, flash drive data recovery and the people who often get really upset when they find out what the price is. Keeping in mind his price is at least 1/5 of what other places typically charge. Like he is quite literally 20% of the cost. So on track and places like that will traditionally charge, upwards of $1,200 to $1,800, and he's starting off at $300. I mean, it's just a fraction of the cost. And he's also very fast, and I like that he keeps you in the loop. Like when you send your drive to him, they'll let you know they received it. They keep updating you with emails as to what the progress is and the status of your drive, and they're very fast. So I'm not being paid by him to do this. I just think it's a service you should all be very aware of in case you need that service. And I'm seeing some contributions coming in here. 19TRC93 has contributed £5. Thank you. It's very kind. I appreciate that. If there's anything you want me to shout out along with your donation, just leave a comment there in the chat. And I'm happy to do that for you, and I do appreciate your support. So anyway, so 300 DDR. Let me just put that there. You guys can check it out. 300ddr.com. He's been around for quite a while. He's got super Yelp reviews. Look through the Yelp reviews. They speak for themselves. The guy's just an honest guy who enjoys what he does, and he wants to give people, a good quality service at a good price. And super nice guy. Showed me the whole operation. Showed me how everything works. He's probably got $100,000 or more in data recovery equipment. There's equipment. One's called a deep spar. A deep spar unit can run $2,500 to $10,000 just for one unit. I think he's got 8 of them. And then he's got a bunch of other different kinds of equipment. He's got this soldering station, the likes of which I've never seen before, that enables him to remove surface-mounted chips. And it's really cool. He actually did a demonstration of how he can transfer a bad firmware chip off of the circuit board on a bad drive and basically he has a ton of spare hard drives laying around because these firmware updates are very specific to the drives. And he does it, you know, the whole swap out of the firmware surface mounted chip. And I've never seen surface mounted chips removed or installed. Everything I've always worked with circuit boards had pins that went down into the circuit board. And when you do surface mount, you've got to heat up all, like this chip had 8 pins on it. So all 8 pins have to be heated up at the same time in order to get the chip removed. And you can't really do that with a traditional soldering iron, because when you heat up one and then you move to the next one, the one you just heated up cools off. And it's an exercise in frustration. And then because you have the soldering iron on the chip so long, you end up burning the chip out from getting it too hot. So it was really intriguing to watch him work and to see all of these drives he had running, and, you know, multiple monitors all showing the progress of the data recovery. And hopefully you don't need those services. This is why we make backups, right? Because if you have copies of your data, you will never be put in a position to ever need Brian's services. There's a lot of competition out there doing data recovery, and a lot of these guys are really good. I like Scott Moulton at myharddrivedied.com. Scott's not that inexpensive, but Scott's also a certified private investigator, so he can provide the data to courts when there are judicial cases. Not anybody can just do the data recovery. You basically have to be for many states in the United States, you have to be a private investigator in order for that data to be qualified as admissible evidence. So he's got that certification, which, you know, anything involving law is big bucks. And he also has the facilities for opening drives and doing much more complicated types of data recovery than Brian does at 300 DDR. But at 300 DDR, they still do some pretty complicated stuff. But we were talking about how people that have a flash drive, they say, well, can you get the data off this flash drive? It's got a project file on it or something. And he's like, sure, it's $300. And they're like, well, it's a $10 flash drive. It's like, well, that's not the point. The flash drives are actually harder to recover from and very time consuming. And it's not about how much the drive is. You know, a $60 1 terabyte drive is, you know, going to start you around $300 to do the data recovery on that, even though you could buy 5 1 terabyte drives for that price. So that's a bit of his frustration sometimes when he deals with folks, especially if they've never called for data recovery before. They don't really appreciate the value proposition that he offers that nobody else in the industry even comes close to. And I don't know why. Clearly he's able to make good money at you know, a $300 data recovery service. So how crazy rich must these other places be, right? Now, the other issue becomes data destruction. Sometimes somebody's getting rid of a hard drive for whatever reason. They're upgrading, they want to give it away, they want to donate it, but they want to make sure everything on the drive is completely destroyed. Now, there are freeware utilities you can download to run off Linux boot disks, like Derek's Boot and Nuke. DBAN is a popular one. There's a few others. CCleaner even has a wipe free space option if you want to hook the drive up as a slave drive, and you know, boot your operating system as normal, run CCleaner, and then just wipe the drive, the slave drive. But you can be prepared for that to take many, 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 many hours. And furthermore, there is a disclaimer on many of these utilities that they don't guarantee the data removal. They also don't guarantee data removal from solid state drives or other types of drives. And I'm not sure why that is, but like DBAN has a big warning about all the drives that it says it cannot securely erase. It'll do it, but it's just telling you you may be not as secure as you think you are. So what do you do? Basically, if you just got one drive and you just need to wipe one drive, you know, Derek's Boot and Nuke or any of these other free utilities are fine for you. But what do you do if you're a technician? and you have a doctor's office as a client, or a financial institution as a client, a bank, a hedge fund or stock trading company, and they need the hard drive wiped, or they need 50 hard drives wiped, and they need proof because the government requires it for auditing purposes, what do you do? Well, this is a service that you can offer as a technician also to your residential clients that have simple needs. And that is to offer data, what do I want to call it? Secure data wiping. And as I mentioned, to wipe a drive, depending on how thoroughly you want to wipe it, could take anywhere from as little as 2 hours to as much as 2 weeks, depending on the size of the drive and the thing you're hooking the drive up to, how fast it operates. There's a lot of variables there. So there's this tool that, there's numerous ones. I went with this one because another tech in a forum spoke very highly of it, and it's very affordable. And I wrote to the company and I said, would you send me one of these so I can review it? And they did. That's always a good response from a company that sees a value in YouTube reviews. So this is from a company called WiebeTech, and it's called the Drive eRazer Ultra. And this is a standalone secure drive eraser. And in the box, we've got the unit itself, as you can see here. And what's great is you're not tying up any computers, right? You just have this little box you plug in, and it can run as long as it wants to for all I care. It's not like if I'm running Dirt's Boot and Nuke, that computer can't be used for anything else during all the hours. And if I've got a bunch of drives to wipe, the other issue is, how do I prove to the customer that I wiped them? And that's where devices like this come in handy. And you see it's not very large. Let me bring it up to the camera and give you a closer look of it. So what we've got here, the drive eraser, it's all controlled through this interface. And on this side of it, we've got a USB port because you can plug it into a computer, but I don't know why you'd want to. On this side is power. Here is the output power for the drive you're hooking up, along with an ID interface and a SATA interface. And then here, on this side of, right here, this is a serial port for a data receipt printer that can output the date and time and serial number of the drive, along with the type of erasure that was done and confirmation that the type of erase was done. And that's what is required by law for certain institutions in case they're audited. So if you're a tech, you got to provide that if you're going to offer secure drive erasing. Now, there's lots of different definitions of what a secure erase is. In the box, we've got our power cord and our power adapter. That powers the unit. We've got an IDE cable along with the power connector that plugs in here for Molex for an IDE drive. And then we've got SATA and power, which plug into the back of the unit, and then this would plug into your hard drive, whether that's a laptop drive, a solid state drive, a desktop hard drive, doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. And then there's a metal plate that's included because these drives get really, really hot when you're doing the erasure. It's really working the drive hard. And the drive may even become too hot to touch. So they recommend putting this little heat shield or heat spreader on the drive, and this will help keep the drive cool. It's not required, and obviously you'd have to use some screws to secure this. I wish it snapped on or something, but unfortunately, the fact that they included it all is actually pretty impressive. Again, not something you have to use, couldn't hurt, but it does require an extra step of at least putting one screw on each side, right, so you can have it straight and have it help dissipate the heat. Now, there's a lot of different governmental regulations regarding what type of erasure is required and considered to be a secure erase, depending on who you ask. So, for example, the United States has the Department of Defense, or DoD, and they have defined what a secure erase is. And this device here has that option if you want to do a DoD erase. There's also, somewhere on the box, a couple of other country standards. So we have the UK standards, the Euro standards, and the Australian standards. And I'm not exactly sure which is which here, but basically there's NIST, which has a standard for clearing and a standard for purging. The DoD, the Department of Defense, has just a basic clearing the drive, which is faster, versus a sanitize. And the sanitize is defined by what data is written and how often it's written. Then there's CSEC, or CSEC, which is Canada's data standard sanitation standard. There's HMG IS5, which is Great Britain's data sanitation standard. There's DSD, that's the Australia's, well, DSD ISM 6.2.92 is Australia's data sanitation standard. And then there's an option here called Verify Only, which basically doesn't overwrite the drive, it just verifies, it performs just the verification step only. Now beyond the secure erase and sanitize erases that are defined by different government bodies, the unit itself has what the manufacturer considers to be a reasonable and prudent quick erase option and random erase, as well as a secure erase. Now using the quick erase on I think it was a 1 terabyte drive I did it on, took 2.5 hours. And then doing the secure erase, I think, was 6 to 8 hours. I would love to measure that live, but we would be here a very long time to just sit there and watch it's got an LCD screen on it that'll tell you, percentage-wise how far along it's gone and how much more time. It kind of estimates the time, but it's not real accurate. Again, there's a lot of variables that are involved. So I like the idea that you can set it and forget it and not tie up a machine. Now ideally, in a perfect world, I would securely erase a drive and then send it off to Brian at 300 DDR to see if he can recover anything from it. But I'm absolutely confident that he will not be able to. When I was talking to Brian, we had a little bit of a debate about formatting a drive and what Windows does in a Windows format, if it actually erases the drive or it's just basically checking all the sectors. Brian said it erased the drive. I argued it does not erase the drive, it only verifies the sectors. And so we hit Google and we learned we were both right. I think prior to Windows Vista, Windows and Windows 95 and all the prior versions of Windows and DOS only verified the sectors. So I was right. But then he was right that after we're from Vista forward, when you format the drive, it's doing enough of an erasure that a guy like Brian, who does this service, will not be able to recover the data. Now, a lost partition, a damaged partition, or a erased partition, data can be recovered on. So that was a learning experience for me. I had not heard, whenever this change took place around Windows Vista, that the format would actually erase the drive that thoroughly where a professional data recovery service could not get it back. But that doesn't mean that the super high-end data recovery services like OnTrack or the government could not get the data back through the special equipment that they have. So by using a device like this and using like even the most basic quick erase, it's going to be so much more secure than the format. And I often like to go into a drive in DOS, bring up the disk part is the name of the DOS tool, and disk part is short for disk partition. And there you can select, be careful which drive you select, and then you can type in the word clear. I think it's clear. And what that does is it wipes the drive partition. If you've ever taken a drive out of a RAID array and formatted it, you might find out when you use the drive again that it's still recognized as a RAID drive by your BIOS. That's because you haven't cleared that partition table. Even though you wiped the hard drive and you reformatted it, you have to actually do a partition clear on it. so that it comes back out like it did brand new out of the box, just with nothing on it. And a device like this, it writes over that partition table just as it writes over all the other sectors, which is what makes it so much more secure. And then also following those different governmental standards from Canada, Australia, Great Britain, and Europe, along, like I say, with Department of Defense. You have all these different options to meet your country's standard. And when you're paid by a company to securely erase their drives, you can get the optional, printer for this. This company doesn't make it. It's just a standard, industry standard receipt printer. And then you can provide them with that that receipt that they need to prove that the data was wiped as required by law. And that's what makes that service worth more money than the do-it-yourselfers, right? Who don't have those restrictions. They're just doing it for their own personal reasons versus doing it because the law requires it. Whenever you're doing something the law requires, you can bill a lot more for it because you're generally dealing with very large corporations, and the responsibility is huge. You're taking on a huge liability that if data were to get out, that you said you wiped it and you didn't, you could potentially even go to jail. So there's more risk, there's more responsibility, and as such, there's more money to be made. And for residential clients, you could certainly offer secure data erasure. You can even offer to do it on site where the customer can watch you. And of course, there's always destroying the drive. The problem is with a solid state drive, you have to break every single little chip. Versus a mechanical drive, you just destroy the platters, you're good to go. Or even just destroy the heads. It's unlikely anybody's ever going to be able to read the data again, even if they put different heads on it. But certainly if you destroy the platters, it's done. So you've seen me take hard drives out to the desert and shoot them. It's very therapeutic. And nobody's getting the data back. But on a solid state drive, take that out to the desert and shoot it. I'm going to hit a couple of chips, but the rest of the chips still have data on them, potentially. And anybody who really had the tools could theoretically take those chips off the circuit board, put them into their own circuit board, and then read the data off of them. So that's why with a solid state drive or with a flash drive, there's got to be total destruction. And that's why they make hard drive shredders and solid state drive shredders. And they've got them where it's just a great big metal, it's a tool of leverage. You put the drive in there and it just crushes the drive. And then the shredder one, I think it's automated. I'm not sure. You definitely wouldn't want to get your hand caught in there, and it just chews it up. And that's obviously for places that, probably governmental places where there is no erasure that's good enough. There must be absolute and total destruction of the drive into fine powder and or fine gritty pieces, but no big chunks. Just everything's got to be completely destroyed beyond any possibility of reconstruction. And so those devices do exist. If you were to, go to Google and type in drive shredder or something like that. How are we doing on this stream? Is the feed? I'm just noticing. You guys should be getting 1080, but I'm noticing my stream health is kind of sitting in the yellow. I might need to drop my back down to 720. I'm going to look for some feedback here on that. Lee1302 says, Carrie, wanted to say thank you. I built my own gaming PC and learned a lot from you. Well, thank you, Lee. I appreciate the kind words. What about microwaving the solid-state drive? That should totally kill the chips. Not exactly sure how you can microwave a solid-state drive without causing a fire in your microwave oven. I'm not going to recommend anything that dangerous to my audience. DoD specifications include the actual secure erase and a physical destruction. I'm sure that is a certain level of DoD, but it is not the only level of DoD. Is that a quick format or a full format that erases? It's a full format on Windows that erases the drive, not a quick one. The quick one's just erasing the table of contents on the drive. That's why it's quick. Okay, 1080p is working. So we are broadcasting in 1080p. People say it's looking good. Good, thank you for the feedback. Good. Someone says use a junk microwave. So what you have to understand is, anybody can make a YouTube video, and this is part of the frustration I run into in that there are people giving some very dangerous advice. So there are people that know the inherent dangers of sticking a solid-state drive or anything metal in a microwave oven, and they just assume everybody else knows that too. And the problem is, in the world today, if you give out advice like that on a YouTube channel and somebody injures themselves or worse, you could be held liable and responsible for the damages incurred because you suggested they do it. So I don't do that on my channel. It's not because I think people are dumb. It's just an unnecessary risk. There's things you can do versus things you shouldn't do. And putting any metal object in your microwave oven is just a bad idea, and certainly nothing I'm going to recommend. It's possible, and it could work, but I think it's extraordinarily foolish. If you're a working computer technician, you would be an embarrassment to everybody in my trade. And I think that's where we run the line between enthusiasts and hobbyists and professionals. Professionals are held accountable for their actions, and things get real serious real quick. So if you find I'm very serious about stuff like this is why. When people can get injured or killed, when the destruction of property that happens unintentionally from those that are trying to take shortcuts in a place where they're getting paid to do work responsibly, in any form of work. If a mechanic is working under a car with just a jack with no jack stands, it just makes all mechanics look bad. So when a guy's doing it in his garage, that's fine, but he should not be promoting that in any way, shape, or form to give people the idea that that's safe or recommended. It's a very foolish thing to do. I would think most actual computer techs would have common sense. No, they don't. In fact, a lot of people in the world have a different definition of what common sense is. So we've got people on this channel that range from 12 years old to 80 years old, maybe even beyond that. And they don't know these things. And because you're not speaking to somebody one-on-one, you have no idea who they are. People will mimic what they see or will follow what they see to test it. They're curious, and then can end up hurting themselves or causing property damage or other things, and it'll come back to you. And there's a good chance it'll come back to you in a legal ramification. So even though your intentions were well placed, these are things that should just never be done. You shouldn't be sticking a metal object in your microwave under any condition. And if you do, you shouldn't be bragging about it, let alone suggesting others do it. It's a foolhardy thing to do. So again, this is why I do my YouTube channel, because there are too many other folks out there creating YouTube channels that are giving out some very dangerous, potentially dangerous advice, and have not been held accountable for it yet. But it's a matter of time. I'm predicting we're going to start seeing some massive lawsuits coming through. It's already starting to happen a little bit with other types of YouTube channels. There was recently a story in the news of a guy who wanted his girlfriend to shoot him with a .50 caliber Desert Eagle gun, and he was going to hold a thick book up to his chest. And what he did is he took a different thick book and he fired the gun into it, and the bullet didn't go all the way through. So he figured he was going to be safe and this was going to get him a lot of YouTube views. So he grabbed a different thick book, held it and said, "Shoot me," and his girlfriend shot him and it went through the book into his chest and he died. She will probably serve time for manslaughter. Don't underestimate what a YouTube creator will do for views, and don't underestimate what your viewers may replicate, whether they're doing it as a joke or they're doing it seriously because they're curious and they want to see what will happen if they do it. So yes, I do take this stuff, when it comes to this kind of content, I like to make my YouTube channel fun, smile and laugh, but this kind of stuff with people getting hurt and property damage, there's no joke in that. So, all right, let's look at what's going on in the chat. Do you guys have any questions I can answer for you regarding data recovery, data destruction, data backup? Uncorrectable sector count. Is this drive trash? Yes, that drive is trash. I like to run a utility called Crystal Disk Info. It's absolutely for free, and you've seen me run it in past videos. And if the drive is in a failed state or in a cautious state, the drive is bad and needs to be replaced ASAP. Ideally, you've got all the data backed up off of it. If you don't, it's sort of like looking for car insurance after you got into the car accident. It can get to be, well, in the case of a car accident, impossible for anybody to insure you for the accident you had. In the case of data recovery, depending on how the drive crashed, depends on if the data can be recovered, how much of the data can be recovered, and the cost of that data recovery. And I just think that 300 DDR, $300 data recovery, is the fastest, cheapest, most professional, all those things combined, of all the services. And if you have to send it off, they're the ones that are going to get your drive back to you faster, cheaper than anybody else. Guaranteed, nobody can do it as cheap as they can. I just don't want to see any of you. Brian's a good guy. And Brian and I have spoken, and Brian Cometa, the owner of $300 data recovery, and we've agreed he should not be in business. If everybody backed their data up, he would have no job. And yet, he's busier than busy. The one thing you can count on with human beings is, much like when you talk about death, nobody thinks it's going to happen to them anytime soon. Maybe someday, but not today and not tomorrow. I don't think you can talk to many people as they lay dying and go, did you know today was going to be your last day on earth when you woke up this morning? I think most people would say, I had no idea. And that's what happens with backups. People, I'll do it tomorrow. It'll be fine. It's been fine. It'll continue to be fine for now. And it just becomes less and less of a priority, and then something tragic happens. A customer of mine got hit with ransomware, hadn't made a backup for 6 months. And what are you going to do? I can't wave a magic wand and undo that ransomware. He can pay the ransom, or he can restore from his backup he did 6 months ago and lose the data that he since created or changed in the last 6 months, which is, by the way, what he ultimately ended up doing, was recovering from the backup 6 months ago. And then he wanted to know, what can I do to prevent this from ever happening in the future? And I said, well, you were already doing what you were supposed to do to prevent this from happening in the future 6 months ago, but you stopped doing it. So it's not that you don't have the right tools, it's that you are not performing the action. And that's where services like Carbonite and Mosey come in handy. Well, they will back your data up into the cloud, and it's all encrypted, and it all happens automatically for like $60 a year, and then you don't have to think about it. But it is slow, and some people feel that, I don't know where my data is. I'm basically putting my data, trusting a company with it. What if they go out of business? Well, if they go out of business, you're going to know about it ahead of time. They don't just randomly shut their doors. The creditors will shut them down, and then they'll give you a few weeks to get your data off. That's the way it has always happened. There's never been an instance where a company that houses data has shut down and people have lost their data. It has never, ever happened. People say, well, what if someone downloads my data? Well, for the most part, nobody knows who you are. Unless you're a public figure or celebrity, nobody cares about you. That's the reality that we live in. If Penn and Teller give a great example. The magicians and comedians, Penn and Teller, he says, if I walked down the beach naked, I'd probably be arrested, but I wouldn't be on the front page of the newspaper because I'm not a big enough celebrity. And the reality is, we have what's called security through obscurity. because nobody knows who you are, nobody cares who you are, and they don't care about you or your data. So the likelihood that anybody would pinpoint you to target is extraordinarily minor. However, it is possible. In the same way it's possible, somebody could break into your home or your business and steal your computer or steal your backups. And if your backups aren't encrypted, I mean, let's talk about two different things here. People who don't make backups, or rather people who do make backups, and people who make encrypted backups. So, okay, great, you made a backup. That's wonderful. Is it encrypted? And when I ask an audience this, when I do my live presentations, and I ask the audience, not a single person has ever raised their hand. So they're questioning me about how secure is Carbonite, how secure is Mozy, how secure are these, Dropbox and other sites that house your data in the cloud. And I go, well, all those cloud sites are encrypting your data. If I break into your house and I steal your backup, is it just files and folders I can see when I plug it into the USB drive? Yes. So they're more secure than you are. And people think, well, my house isn't going to get broken into. Well, that's exactly what everybody thinks until their house gets broken into. My house won't flood. My house won't catch fire. It won't happen to me. You don't know what's going to happen to you. And that's why we have insurance. Backups are the equivalent of insurance. Secure backups are even better. So if you know yourself and you know, I'm probably not going to find the time to do this like I should, use an automated service like Carbonite or Mozy. If you have privacy concerns, that your data may fall into the wrong hands, so therefore you don't want to put it online, but you're going to procrastinate and not do it yourself, it's really hard to feel any sympathy for you whatsoever when you lose your data. It's sort of like, all we can do is lead the horse to the water. Can't make the horse drink the water. So it's really hard for me to go, well, you got what you deserved. If I tell you, one of my favorite expressions is a mother telling her child to get out of the tree. Kid's climbing a tree. And the kid's not listening. And she says, if you fall out of that tree and break your leg, don't come running to me for help. See, a kid with a broken leg isn't going to be able to run. Anyway, it's your data, and what happens to it is your responsibility. Whether that's a hard drive failure, a virus, an accidental deletion, a fire, a theft, a flood, there's ransomware, there's thousands of variables of what causes hard drive data loss. And backups make it so it's inconvenient, but it's not devastating. When you are a computer technician and a customer says, hey, my computer's not turning on, what do you think it is? Well, it sounds like a bad hard drive. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means we replace the drive and reinstall the operating system and all your programs. Well, what about my pictures? Oh no, those will be gone. So you just recover from a backup. Well, what do you mean a backup? Well, I mean a copy, a copy of those pictures that were important to you. You have copies of those, right? Well, the copies are on the computer. Well, no, I'm sorry. If the hard drive died, they're not on the computer any longer. We could send the drive into data recovery, and I'll mention Brian Cometa, and that's $300, starting $300, and see if he can get the data back. But if he can't, it's gone forever. And now the person becomes emotional. Oftentimes, customers will start crying on the phone. And it's not as though the technician can go, oh, you're crying. Okay, I can get your data back then. You cry all you want. It doesn't change anything. Now you've become a psychologist trying to ease a customer that, hey, look, you lost those pictures. I go, well, I have pictures of my little baby on there, and I don't have any other copies. That's all I have. I'm sorry. I had a trip to Alaska. I don't think I'm ever going to Alaska again. I had all my photos. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you want, call around. See what other people tell you. And that's pretty much what I tell people to do. I go, call some other places. Maybe they can help you. I'm telling you, that from what you're describing to me, you've got a bad drive. The drive needs to be replaced. The operating system and the programs can be reinstalled, and we can get your email back up and going and get you back up and running. But without a backup, that's as far as I can take you. And data recovery services, you're looking At a place like OnTrack, you're looking at $1,200, $1,500, $1,800. And people, I don't have that kind of money. I don't know what else to tell you other than call around and get some other opinions. And I hate those phone calls. I hate, and a lot of people think that I've kind of become cold about it, but after you hear it over and over and over again for 20 years, and you talk about backups over and over and over again for 20 years, it's like telling somebody, don't run with scissors, don't run with scissors, don't run with scissors, don't run with scissors, and they run with the scissors and they fall and they stab themselves, and you go, well, you're an idiot. You were warned, you did it anyway, you did this to yourself, and now you're looking to me to help you. I'm going to get you your help. All right, here's what we're going to do. But as far as any sympathy, it's really hard to have sympathy for people when they know better. And it's like, I'm really sorry that it happened, but it was completely avoidable. And the only person that could have made this avoidable was you. And if it wasn't important enough for you, why do you think it should be having some devastating effect on me? It has no impact on me whatsoever. I'm here to do a job, and if you have backups and you don't know how to restore them, I'm more than happy to do that for you and make that part of your recovery. But if you don't have them, I can't help you with it. And that often leads to the follow-up question, which is, how do I make backups? Well, that's a loaded question. Whether you do hard drive images, whether you use a Windows backup service, whether you use an online cloud service like Carbonite or Mozy that I've mentioned, whether you do file synchronization and just copy important files or important directories, that's entirely up to you. But how do I do it? Well, I don't know how to explain file and directory structure to somebody who doesn't understand files and directories. I can't really tell them what to back up since I don't know what they have. I can't tell them how to use their backup software because there's thousands of different backup programs out there and different versions within, other than to read the directions of the backup software. If you bought a backup drive, it came with backup software. Or just use a service like Carbonite and Mozy, just install it and be done with it. It'll automatically back up your My Documents folder, your pictures, things like that. Just does it by default. And I've kind of thrown in the towel on it. I mean, beyond that, it's like, you can make a system image. How do you do that? Plug your USB drive into your Windows 10 computer, and a little box pops up and says, what do you want to do with this drive? It's the very first thing that pops up. If you would just read what's on your screen, you wouldn't feel so lost for information. Click the box. It says, use this drive for backup. That's one of your options. Do you want to back up? Yes. Then click use this drive for backup. Then the next window pops up, and you just read what's in the window and click the next button. This stuff is incredibly simple, but because people have never done it before, they want to have a roadmap. What do I do next? And what do I do with it? Just read the screen. And if you get stuck on anything, call me then. But for me to try and walk them through it so that they can be prepared for what to expect, when they can't even picture what I'm describing, I'm just throwing words at them, it just goes whoosh, and they go, wow, man. It makes them feel like this is so complicated, and it's incredibly simple. So that's why if you can't be bothered to back up your data, and then you contact a technician, and you think the technician sounds kind of cold or cold-hearted about it, it's because the technician has seen this over and over and over and over and over again. It's like a doctor that sees people die all the time say, I'm sorry for your loss. And it just kind of comes out like, some boilerplate script, I'm sorry for your loss. It doesn't necessarily feel like they're really that sorry. Just after a while, after you see it over and over and over and over and over again, it loses its shock. So I realize that when it happens to somebody, they can be in shock. But I'm not a psychologist. I am not a counselor. I'm a technician, and I'm here to help you. Whether that's getting your computer up and running, and making it faster, making it more secure. That's my job. For the businesses that I have on retainers, I do their backups for them because I cannot trust them to make the backups. And they're going to call me in an emergency, and they're going to expect me to be able to solve it. So I make sure the backups get done my way, and it's part of the service they pay me for. Well, we got a nice contribution here from Michael McAllister. He says, I'm 29. When I was 10 or so, my sister was told that making a bottle of nail polish slightly warmer would help her open it. So she put it in the microwave instead of under hot water and ended up in the hospital. I have a scar on my arm from a glass shard. Yes, when I was 18 years old, I worked at Radio Shack. And big shock, right? And there was an ashtray. It was like made of wood, and it stood about 2.5 feet tall. And it had a metal ashtray that was inserted into a hole on the top. And the Radio Shack stores were remodeling, and they were throwing all that old stuff out. And we thought it would make a good subwoofer for the car. So I took it home and threw the ashtray out. And now I've got this nice, long skinny box with a hole in the top that smells of cigarettes, really reeks of cigarettes. So I took some Glade or Lysol or something, and I just sprayed it all inside, and it just wouldn't go away. Sprayed some more and let it sit. And my girlfriend at the time said, why don't you put a vanilla candle in there and let it just burn out? And I thought, well, that's a good idea, but I just got done spraying Lysol and Glade or whatever it was, and I want that to have time to, evaporate before I light any candles in there. So I waited a while, and then I got the little vanilla candle, stuck my arm down that hole, flipping the switch on the lighter, and the lighter wouldn't light. It was like 2-3 times wouldn't light. Get a spark, and then maybe it would light up for just a second and it would go away, which should have been my first clue to stop. Because there was only a hole on the top, it really wasn't properly vented. It's a subwoofer. You don't want it to be properly vented. And so out of my stubbornness, I kept flicking that lighter, and finally it stayed lit, and I touched it to the wick on the candle, and there was a loud boom, and every door in the house slammed wide open. And it just was a huge concussion throughout the house. And my eyebrows, no, not my eyebrows, my eyelashes were completely singed off. If you've ever seen anybody without eyelashes, you know something's wrong, right? You look at them, you go, something's not right, but I can't quite figure out what it is. I had friends telling me my eyelashes would never grow back, that eyelashes don't grow. Obviously, they grew back. And the box didn't come apart or anything. Nothing got damaged. But I looked a little funny until my eyelashes grew back. And I never did make a subwoofer out of the thing. I never could get the smell of cigarettes out of it. So sometimes these little things we do to save money can end up costing us a lot more. I'm a big fan of do-it-yourself, but within reason. And, I was afraid what was going to happen happened, which is why I thought, letting the thing sit there for a while would have been enough, and it just obviously wasn't enough. So messing with stuff like that is very, very dangerous, and certainly nothing that I would recommend or advise, and would be cautious for any viewer watching YouTube videos. Was a little girl watching a magician on YouTube, and just recently in the news, like 3 weeks ago, where the magician acts like he's taking a couple coins and sucking them up, and she was mimicking that, and when she did the sucking the coin, she accidentally swallowed it and had to be rushed to the emergency room. And we're going to see more and more of this, guys, and if you're going to make YouTube videos, keep that in mind. All right, let's go back to the chat and see what we got going on. I've got a complete backup of all my drives on a NAS. Since this device is standing right next to my PC, I have all the important data on a drive at my parents' house in case of fire. Beautiful. That's great. Carrie, what would you use for old corrupted Windows XP backup file short of sending it out to 300 DDR? I don't know that 300 DDR can fix corrupted files. They can recover files off drives that have failed. I don't know a service any cheaper than 300 DDR. If you want to play with it yourself, there's numerous freeware utilities. However, you better be ready to sacrifice that drive if you fail. So there's some people that have this attitude that I'd really like to have this data back, and I'll do what I'll look online and look for software and look for other things to try and get the data back. But if I hose the whole thing up and make it unrecoverable in the process, I'm okay with that. That's your choice. But when somebody takes a drive that's failed and tries to recover it themselves, fails, and then thinks a service like 300 DDR can get it back, chances are you've ruined whatever opportunity you had to get it back. You have to decide right away, is this data important or not? If it's not important and you want to play around with learning how to recover data and you're okay if in that process you are not able to recover it, that then nobody will ever be able to, knock yourself out. But just be fully aware of your expectations before you begin, that you are risking the potential of getting that data back when you try to do it yourself. If the data is important, you want to send it off to a service like 300 DDR. The good news is the folks at 300 DDR will not make your drive worse. So if you send it to them and they go, this is something that's going to require a much more expensive, much more complicated recovery, the likes of which OnTrack does, $1,200 and up, they'll send you the drive back, and then you can then pursue that if it's that important to you. But like I said, 4 out of 5 drives they're able to recover without any problem, and they do it much, much cheaper. Any recommendations for an imaging software to make a bootable Windows image where I can add my own software to the image? I don't use anything like that, and I don't recommend that because software versions change independently, and it's hard to roll back those kind of changes. So what I recommend you do is you get a system up and running, and when it's set up the way you like it, you've got all your product keys installed, all your activations are done, all your updates are done, and everything's perfect for that specific machine, then image it. And whether you use Macrium Reflect, Acronis, Clonezilla, or even Windows built-in system image, it's all equivalent. That's all good. As for some sort of universal that you can go and take to anywhere, no, there's no tool that I'm aware of. Windows itself has a system builders tool, which is really intended for OEMs that have to, and basically it does the install along with Windows, but those are really time consuming to maintain. Yeah, I would estimate, unless you're a company like Dell or HP putting out hundreds of computers a week or thousands a week, that you'll spend more time maintaining that image than you'll ever will be using that image, or the amount of time that you would just take to do everything one by one, install each program individually after Windows has been installed. It will probably take you less time than a system image like that. But certainly you can explore that. It's nothing that nothing I can recommend, because anybody who would need a tool like that should be hiring somebody to do it for them. Can you make a bootable Malwarebytes flash drive? Absolutely, yes. You just need to make a boot disk, a USB boot disk, and I believe there's a command line for running Malwarebytes from a command line. Certainly you can do it with programs, I believe, like, I might be overspeaking here. There's so many different utilities now. I'm trying to think of the ones that run independently from a boot drive. I mean, clearly you could put Windows, a bootable Windows installation on a flash drive, and then have Malwarebytes installed on that, and then when you boot to it, then your C drive would become, a slave drive, and scan it that way. The only problem you really run into that is you don't get registry cleaning. The only way you're going to get registry cleaning is if you're in the Windows environment itself. So you have to at least be in safe mode to be able to let the program get into that registry and scour it. And there are other boot disks. Hiren's Boot CD is very common. It's got numerous utilities on it, and other Linux-based boot disks that have varying levels of antivirus. But the problem with those is they're often not updated. And if the computer you're cleaning is infected, the last thing you want to do is hook it up onto your network. And the ones that will update, remember, if you're booting from a CD, it's not updating the CD with the updates. You could be full program versions behind. So these are tools. I honestly think these are tools you should download as you need them. I don't think you should have a bootable repair disk in the odds that you'll need it, because chances are by the time you need it, it'll be obsolete and you'll need to create another one. So my advice is create it as you need it. Yes, you can use numerous utilities like Rufus to make flash drives bootable. This is true. Babel Forever says Kaspersky Antivirus has a boot disk you can download. It's the Antivirus 10 CD tool. This is true. There's a lot of options out there. Is it possible to build my own network attached storage and put my own network attached storage OS on it? Well, this is more of a hobbyist or enthusiast project, nothing we really cover here on this channel. But yes, you can look up Google FreeNAS or look up FreeNAS in YouTube videos. I'm sure there are YouTube creators that demonstrate what FreeNAS is and how to use it, but nothing we cover here. That's again, as a professional PC technician, I don't get paid to create FreeNAS. I don't get paid to fix FreeNAS because it's free. This is something people do on their own and something people fix on their own. And inherently, the people that do that don't ask, or rather don't pay somebody to do it for them. Therefore, it's not covered on my channel. All-in-One System Rescue Toolkit has offline live CD scanning and test disk photo record. I don't know what photo record is in the Windows Auto Run. FreeNAS should be used with ECC RAM on server hardware. You can use a bootable Windows PE disk. Yes, yeah, you can create a Windows preliminary. What is it? A preliminary. What does PE stand for? Preliminary. It's killing me. I know this. Come on. I'm sure someone's going to tell me in the chat room. I'm trying to think if I can come up with it before they do. Preliminary. Oh, God, it's killing me. Pre-installed environment? I think, is that right? Is it pre-installed environment? I know the E is environment. All right, anyway, you can Google Windows PE or creating a Windows PE and find information for that. As well, again, as a professional PC technician, people don't pay me for this, so it's nothing I do. Therefore, because I don't do it, I don't have any experience about it, I'm not going to give you any advice about something I don't personally have hands-on experience about, other than telling you to Google search those terms or YouTube search those terms to find somebody who's sharing their experience with you. Again, more of a hobbyist or enthusiast topic, not one, if you want to become a computer technician, these are not things that you need to learn and they will not benefit you in any way. The way you're going to make money as a computer technician is to provide services, typically managed services, to businesses, any kind of business, whether it's a home-based business or a very large corporation, to maintain their desktop workstations, their antivirus, their Windows updates, their backups, make sure everything's always running smoothly for all the clients and that they have somebody to call when things don't work like they should. I can't print, or I want to be able to fax. How do I do that? You get some pretty bizarre requests, and that's where you make money as a professional PC tech, and upwards into large corporations where you're doing network administration, network architecture, where you're designing a new network, connecting different buildings around the world so that they can share data securely, installation of voice over IP telephone lines, cabling, all that is where the money is in the business. Easy BCD 2.3 is good to make a recovery of Windows. There's a lot of options out there to make recovery disks, whether it's system images. There's no shortage of tools out there. And you just try different ones and find one that works for you. For me, again, I'm paid to do it, so I can't risk gambling with my customers' data on a free utility. I have to have a paid utility that has a support number that I can call in an emergency. And when you get any of these free options, you have no help. I mean, you have to help yourself. And that means doing your own Google searches and figuring out things on your own. If you buy a product like Acronis, like what I use, you can call support in the rare instance that you might need it, and they are more or less obligated to help you. I mean, they want to keep you happy, they want to keep you coming back, and it's part of what you pay for. When you're doing things for free, you're on your own. Do you use Hitman Pro? I haven't used Hitman Pro in a long, long time. I found that the reason I stopped using it is I found it to be relatively ineffective compared to other products. Carrie, could you give advice on copiers? Most of them record all copies on an internal hard drive and can be a security problem. That's absolutely right. The big Xerox copy machines, not necessarily from Xerox, but we often use the word Xerox here in America to refer to any stand-up office copy machine. It will, the modern ones have internal hard drives, and so what they're doing is effectively scanning the document, saving it on the hard drive, and then these copy machines are very expensive, and they are typically leased by companies. And when the lease runs out, companies often will upgrade to a faster, larger copy machine that can do, collating. And I've seen my clients firsthand go from, the cheapest thing they could lease to big monsters that work as computer printers and fax machines, and have 8 paper trays, and it's just crazy. You send a print job to it, it just goes chung 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 chung, and just spitting pages out like crazy. And when the lease runs out, when the lease runs out, of course, the company comes and collects the copy machine, and they'll lease it out to somebody else or they'll sell it. They're not under obligation to erase the drive that's in the copy machine. However, they do offer that. They'll tell a company, when you sign the lease, for an extra whatever it is, we'll securely erase the drive. You can pay for that service now over the time of the lease. And they will often, more often than not, let me say that again, more often than not, they will offer that service again. If you didn't, if you declined it the first time, they will offer it again when they come pick up the machine. Do you want to pay, sign here, they got a clipboard, do you want to pay for us to securely erase the hard drive? And companies are often more motivated by money than they are about security. And until the security backfires, then they wish they would have spent the money, because when the security backfires, it costs them a lot more. So whether we're talking about Sony, when they were hacked by, quote unquote, North Korea, they didn't want to spend $1 million on security, and it cost them, I don't know, I'm sure that the cost is still costing them to this very day. We talk about other corporations that have gotten broken into. Every single one of these companies didn't spend enough on security, and as a result, they're spending a lot more. So whenever you see that on the news, some company got hacked, that company cut a corner somewhere and tried to save money with security. It's hard to feel sorry for them. So when it comes to these drives that are in copy machines, the problem isn't necessarily that the drives themselves have the data. The problem is the person responsible, the company, doesn't understand the serious nature of that. Shouldn't be an option of letting them take that copy machine unless that hard drive is wiped. I certainly hope the law will be passed at some point that will require it, just for the sanity and security of every customer, of every irresponsible, cheap business owner trying to save a nickel, and then exposing all of their customers through their, cheapness of not wanting to spend a nickel. And it's obviously more than a nickel, but it's going to feel like a nickel after all the damages are incurred. You're going to wish you spent the nickel. So all we can hope for is a law that requires copy machine vendors to make sure drives are securely erased before they install them for any new customers or any time they collect them. And until a law is passed like that, it's an option. And that option costs money. And it's my view that it shouldn't be an option. It should be built into the price of the machine, and it should be included. Or the copy machine manufacturers themselves should have a button that can be pressed to scrub the drive somewhere on the menuing system. It could be deep into administration areas. These copy machines all have these configuration pages. They often are password protected. You have to enter a code so that a user of the copy machine isn't going to accidentally do it. And that's my view on that. So what else we got going on in the chat here? Is a vast bootable CD good? Whether or not a bootable antivirus tool is any good or not really depends on the computer that you're booting to and the infection that you have. There's no way for anybody to tell you if anything's any good or not. It's not possible, really. I mean, some tools are dangerous. I've mentioned before, SpinRite, the tool from Gibson Research, is an extraordinarily dangerous tool, and in my opinion, you'd have to be extraordinarily foolish to use it. You never make any changes to a failing drive. It is the first rule of data recovery. You never, ever, under any circumstances, for any reason, under any circumstance, do you ever write data to a failing drive. That is just like lighting matches at the gas station. It's just a really stupid, foolish thing to do. And that's all SpinRite does. That's all it does, is it writes on, it manipulates data on a failing drive. And this is dangerous for so many reasons. Not only could it, and often, kill the drive permanently, it can give a user the false impression that it's repaired the drive and that the drive will continue to run flawlessly for years to come. At best, it can extend the life of the drive, but not by much. A failing drive is always going to fail, and it's going to fail sooner rather than later, and it's always best to replace it. And hard drives are so inexpensive today. You can buy a hard drive for less than what SpinRite costs. So a lot of people that use SpinRite, that are promoting it online, are pirating it. They're stealing it, and so it's hard to feel sorry for them because they're too cheap to buy a new drive. Because clearly, if they'd have paid for the product, they could have just paid for a new drive. So, as far as I know, there's no real copy protection in SpinRite. It's a very pirated program. And it seems like the punishment fits the crime there. You stole it, and now you just toasted your drive. And any data recovery possible probably is ruined after you've run SpinRite on it. Probably can't be recovered after that. Some people have said SpinRite fixed their drive. Those people are fools. SpinRite hides the problem. It may reallocate sectors, but it doesn't fix anything. SpinRite does not. There's no software that exists that fixes hardware. Quote me on that. There, I'm going to say it again, real slow. No software has ever existed or will ever exist that can fix hardware. Never. It's never happened in the history of man, and I'll probably never see it in my lifetime. And that's why SpinRite is so dangerous. Now, if Steve Gibson had made a very small change to the SpinRite program, where all it did was read the data from the failing drive, and anything it could successfully read, it moved over to another healthy drive, I would recommend that program. But because it's making changes to a failing drive, it's like somebody's bleeding to death and you think the answer is to cut them more. I mean, eventually, I suppose the problem goes away, but I don't think it's the end result we're all looking for. Our company has been hit with DDoS attacks and are currently having our data stolen. We cannot find who is doing it, yet the company has no internet right now, and it's costing sales guys money. You know, it's hard to feel sorry for companies that hire people in their IT department that are not really qualified. A lot of big companies today see their employees no differently than they see their customers. They see them as another revenue source, a way to make money. So if I can hire somebody at $50,000 a year to be my network administrator, when the typical price for a network administrator is $80,000 or $90,000, you're getting what you pay for. You're getting a guy who's not that good. There may be, exceptions to that rule, but overall, there's a lot of people in positions they don't belong in. They're just not qualified for. I can assure you, if the company had hired somebody that had the proper certifications and knowledge and education and experience, they'd be paying them more than who they're paying now, and they would know exactly how that data got stolen, or better yet, it would have never gotten stolen to begin with because the guy in charge would have put steps in place to ensure that couldn't happen. So we end up sort of in this situation where companies hire the cheapest help they can get, and then they say that they're victims to unsolvable hacks or hacks that couldn't have been avoided, and they can all be avoided. It's the level of technician that's in charge, and it could go all the way. I don't know where it starts. I don't know if it starts at the CEO. I don't know if it starts at the department manager. You can talk to a guy like Mike Smith over at the Mike Tech Show podcast, which he's been doing every week for, 7 or 8 years. And he worked as the manager of an IT department. And he can tell you from personal experience some of the debates and arguments he's had to have with upper management to get the budget he needs to ensure the security of the company. And it doesn't matter how big or how wealthy the company is. They all want to be bigger and they all want to be wealthier. And the way that they do that is by spending as little as possible. And there's certain things in life that are considered investments, and your security of your network in a corporation should be the single most number one priority, more important than any product or service you provide. That security needs to be number one. A hospital needs to have all the tools that the doctors need to perform their job, but it also has to have security to protect the customers and all the patients from any sort of breach of their private medical information, as well as protecting all of the investors in the hospital from lawsuits from data breaches that were completely avoidable if the company had made that a priority. So these companies that suffer these hacks and data losses and they claim they don't know where they're coming from really need to replace people in their IT department and stop looking for the cheapest person and get the best person. And the best problems you are the ones you never had, and it's very difficult to sell that to a client. I had a customer recently say, nothing has happened. Why do we pay you? What do you do? We've been paying you now for years, and I don't understand why we pay you. And so I had to explain to my customer that you're paying me to ensure that nothing happens. It's kind of like changing the oil in your car. Would you take your car to the mechanic and go, look, I've been bringing you my car every 3 months for an oil change for the last 5 years. Nothing's ever happened. Why am I paying you to do this? Well, why don't you not get the oil changed ever and see how that works out for you? It's difficult sometimes to explain to the clients who are sitting there looking for another way to save a dollar. And that's what this client was doing. They said, look, we like you. We don't have any problem with you. We just don't understand why we're spending money on you. And I said, so the old me would be offended. Like, how dare you? What do you think, I'm a con artist? That's offensive. But the evolved me, since I've dealt with this before, realizes that they're sincere. They really don't understand what I do. And I don't want them to understand the details of what I do because, like, I'm going to tell them I do antivirus, I make sure your backups are done. They don't need to know the details of how that's done. That's not their job. Their job is to delegate that away. Their job is to do whatever they're in business for. So let's say, for example, you're an accountant and you know how to do people's taxes. You should spend every minute of your day making money doing people's taxes. That's what you should be doing because that's what you're good at. You should not be trying to fix your own computer. You should not be trying to make your own backups and trying to figure out how to make your own free NAS because you're losing money for all the work you're not doing. So you bill your clients, you get as many clients as you can and do all the work you can, and I do the same thing, okay? I fix computers. I maintain computers. I make sure everything's running effectively. I make sure backups are made. I make sure that hard drives aren't being consumed with temp files so that they're going to crash when they run out of space. And so the customers never experience those problems. So then the customer goes, well, we haven't had any problems. What are we paying you for? Oh, you've had problems. You just don't know about it. And you pay me so that you don't have to know about it. It's my problem. That's what you pay me for. And obviously it's not done with attitude. It's just like, well, in this customer's case, I said, you know, I'm glad you asked because I would love any opportunity. If a customer has any doubt whatsoever, I would much rather the customer express that doubt to me than do it behind my back and say, oh, nothing happens, we don't need them. Again, don't change the oil in your car. Nothing happens. I keep changing the oil. I don't know why. Nothing's ever happened. That's why you change the oil, so that nothing happens. Or insurance. Why do I keep paying my insurance? I haven't been in any car accidents. Well, you never know when you're going to be in one. All these backups that I make for my clients, I hope we never have to use them. There's been a couple occasions, and I did remind them. I said to the boss, I said, you weren't around, but your second in command here can verify that he accidentally erased his memory card and deleted the data directory that he had copied the contents of the memory card onto. And he basically, he had to fly to another state to get these pictures for business. And then when he came back, copied the pictures off the memory card, standard routine, into a folder, and then erased the memory card, put it back in the camera so it would be ready next time he used it. And what I suggested to him was he should change his routine. After he copies the files off the memory card, he should keep the memory card in the camera and not erase it until he's ready to use the camera again. It's not like he's flying out every day. He may fly out once a month. It's not going to hurt anything to let the files sit on the memory card as a backup. And in case this happens in the future, you could go back to the memory card and recover the files. But what he was doing was copying the files and erasing the memory card and putting it back in the camera and then putting the camera away so it was ready whenever the next time he was going to use it, he just takes it out and starts using it. Well, it's not adding a whole lot of steps to just say, look, you can erase the data, when you turn the camera back on, next time you turn it on, when you're on site, just go through the menu and format. It takes 10 seconds. Okay, well, that's well and good for next time. What do we do now? I said, well, now we can look through the backups. Well, the problem was he did all this in the same day, so backups are done at the end of the day. So it wouldn't have been a backup from yesterday because he hadn't put it on there yet. And it wouldn't be a backup that occurs later on that evening because he's already erased the data that he put on. So I said, well, did you use the camera since? And he says, no. I said, well, you can put the memory card, we try and recover off the memory card. There's a free application called Recover that's made by Puriform, the people who make CCleaner. You can try that. Or I said, I have a utility. It's a paid utility that I like, and myself and Mike Smith have both used it really well. It's about $40 or $50. It's called Zero Assumption Recovery, or ZAR, Z-A-R, and it works really well. So I said, let me know how Recover does for you, and if you're unable to recover, don't do anything to the memory card. Just get it to me, and I'll run Zero Assumption on it. And he contacted me back. He said Recover was able to get back everything but like 1 or 2 pictures, which was fine. He was fine with it. It was a huge sigh of relief. And then about a month before that, they had accidentally deleted a whole directory, and we were able to go back to the backup and get that directory back. And so these issues didn't become huge emergencies, and so the boss didn't know these things happened because it was a minor interruption to the day. But I assure you, if the data was lost entirely, and all that data had to be recreated again at the company's expense, preventing them from getting new work done, going back to redo work they'd already done, and then he said, why do we pay you? The only answer I would have would be, that's a very good question. But because we've had these examples firsthand, I could explain to him the reason why this didn't turn into a panic situation. The reason why it didn't feel like the roof caved in on you is because of what I do behind the scenes. So there's a bit of a trust involved. When you delegate a job to somebody, you're trusting them to get that job done. When I hire a surgeon to operate on me, I cannot be awake supervising the surgeon that he's doing the job right. There's a certain amount of trust I've delegated to you, and I expect you to do your job. And it goes with, you drop a car off to a mechanic. Did the mechanic really change the oil? He says he did, but are you going to check it yourself to see if it's been changed? I don't. I mean, if he says he changed it, I have every reason to believe he changed it. And unless something bad happens down the line that's a failure due to a lack of oil change, I'll sue him. And again, that's where we go back from hobbyists and enthusiasts to professionals. Professionals are held accountable and liable for the work they do. As a result, that responsibility and accountability means getting paid. And the more responsibility that you take on, the more money you make. That's why people in upper management make more money than the people doing the physical hard work. You know, somebody could be outside building a street. You'll see when you're driving your car, road construction. Those guys make pretty good money, but they work hard. But their bosses, the guys who sit in air-conditioned offices all day and design the roads, the civil engineers, they make even more money. And if the civil engineer screws up the design, there's huge liability there. The construction worker just builds it to the blueprints. If the blueprints are wrong, it's not their fault. If they don't follow the blueprints, then it's their fault. But if they follow the blueprints and the blueprints are faulty, hey, I did my job. The liability does not fall on me. Someone says, so do you never check your oil? No, I never check the oil. Yeah. Nope. Car tells me. I don't need to look at it. In fact, BMWs today don't even have dipsticks. It's not even possible to check the oil in a modern BMW. They don't even allow it. My car only has 6,000 miles on it, and I check my oil weekly. Modern cars don't need it. I mean, if you have a car that you really hammer on, you know, if you've got like a Subaru WRX or a Wankel rotary engine Mazda, which they don't even make anymore, those things eat oil. If you've got an older car, it's got blue smoke coming out of the back, it's eating oil. You need to be checking it. If you park your car and there's a puddle where your car was, you need to be checking all your fluids. But none of my cars leak. I park them on cement, and they sit for sometimes a few days at a time. And if I see a leak, I get it fixed immediately. Oil changes are done on a regular basis. My Chevy Blazer is 18 years old. I've never checked the oil in it, not once. But I do have an oil pressure gauge that I watch when I'm driving. And on my Mustang, I have a light. Not a light. I have a computer that tells me the status of the oil life, and of course I've got the little window sticker that recommends the time and the mileage that the oil change should be done. And these oil changes are very important. And I don't drive my car like a maniac. I don't do burnouts or redline the engine. Things like that will burn oil. I don't drive like that. So I have no reason to believe that I would be burning enough oil to require adding oil. Furthermore, I don't know what brand of oil they're putting in my car at the dealer. And while I could put a similar oil of the same weight, could be causing more harm than good by mixing different brands of oil. So yeah, best to just leave that alone unless you're in one of those situations where you have an older car with perhaps bad piston rings, or you're very hard on your car, or you have a rotary engine, things like that where oil burning is normal under those circumstances. But for most everyday ordinary folks driving a car like a normal human being, you can burn a quart of oil between oil changes. It's not going to hurt anything. And even then, you shouldn't be burning. If you're burning a quart of oil between oil changes, you need to have something fixed, by the way. But yes, if you want your car to run, you keep changing the oil, and you don't ever go to the mechanic and say, why do I keep changing the oil? Nothing's happened. What's the point of this? And that's the thing you're selling when you're selling managed services to a business client, is you're selling insurance that nothing's going to happen, or we're reducing the statistical odds of anything happening by being proactive instead of being reactive. Most home users are reactive. And you have to get a business client to understand being reactive is very costly. It means your business is down, and it means you're going to pay emergency rates for a technician, and it means all your employees can't work, but they still expect to get paid. Being proactive means we're putting steps and measures and procedures in to reduce the likelihood of anything failing. And if there is a failure, we're reducing the likelihood of the severity of that failure. And because it's managed services, it also means, in my particular case, you will never pay an emergency rate, because I believe in what I do so strongly that if you should have any type of a failure, I will come out and I will fix it at no additional cost. It's all included in the managed service plan. So there's only so much you can do to prevent, let's say, a power supply from failing. I can make sure that the dust and dirt get blown out of the PCs, which again, the clients don't know anything about. It just gets taken care of after business hours. They're not around to see it. But it doesn't mean the power supply still won't fail. It's reducing the odds that it's going to. So there's only so much of that I can control. Sometimes parts just fail. The good news is, it's been a long time since I've had a client with a bad power supply. I had a home user on a new system I built about 2 years ago, and the brand new power supply went out within the first 3 days. It was very embarrassing for me. And the client was very understanding. They said it was no big deal. I came out to their home with a brand new power supply, swapped it out on site, and customer's been happy ever since. That's very, very rare. So, and again, it wasn't a business, it was a home user. And I was just really, really embarrassed by it. It was a brand new power supply. And despite using these power supplies routinely without any problem, just got a bad one. It just happens. All right, do you have any other questions? We're back in the chat here and see what I've been missing. Have you seen any solid-state drives fail? I have not experienced a solid-state drive failure for me or any of my clients since I started using them about 4 or 5 years ago. The only ones I've seen failed are the ones that Brian Cometa had on his workbench over at 300ddr.com. He gets them all the time. Well, I wouldn't say he gets them all the time, but he gets them. He's also gotten a few M.2 drives. I've not seen a failed M.2 drive. John Huckabee's posting an old wives' tale about Coca-Cola being used as a detergent. It's not true. It's not true. People see my Coca-Cola and they like to post so many wives' tales about Coca-Cola. There's nothing specific about Coca-Cola that doesn't exist in any other carbonated beverage. So anything you can do with Coca-Cola, you can do with any other carbonated beverage. And what people use is like someone mentioned like cleaning battery posts on a car. The best thing you can do to clean battery posts on your car is baking soda and water. It works really, really well, like better than anything else. And then once you've got those battery posts clean, get some Vaseline and spread Vaseline around the posts and that'll prevent that corrosion from occurring again. If you don't have any Vaseline, spray some WD-40 on it. It gets a little messy though, and your battery gets all kind of oily, but that'll keep that corrosion. And then the other problem is the WD-40 doesn't last as long, so you gotta, twice a year you gotta spray it again. If you just get Vaseline and coat your battery terminals with Vaseline, you won't have that corrosion if you're getting corrosion on your battery terminals. But this idea of using Coca-Cola as some kind of cleaner or as acidic, simple Snopes Google search will clear the. I hate it when people spread rumors. It's not even a rumor. It's an old wives' tale, and we are living in the information age. So I don't understand why people continue to spread false information when it's so easy to verify stuff nowadays. CCTV user in the chat says, I've had 2 solid-state drives fail in a year. One was 2 weeks old. Yeah, I imagine if a solid-state drive is going to fail, it's probably going to happen within the first couple weeks. I have an HP computer on a new hard drive in. What can I do to speed it up right now? Well, I'm afraid you're going to have to speak English. If you read what you wrote, what you wrote doesn't make any sense. I can't help you. My car's battery is located in the front driver's side sidewall. Okay. People spread false information because research is hard. Really? Really? When I was growing up, you had to go to the library. You had to go to the card catalog. You had to look up the right book, hope that the book wasn't loaned out, and look through the pages of the book to find the information you were looking for. That was hard. Today, you push buttons on a keyboard, and the world's knowledge is available at the push of a button, and that's too hard. You must be a millennial. Dewey Decimal System, that's right, the card catalog in the library. People are spreading false information because they are lazy. I would go a step further and say they're ignorant, at least ignorant on the subjects that they are speaking as authorities on that they have no business being an authority on. Too many people will watch YouTube videos and then go around correcting other people because of what they saw somebody in a YouTube video do, even though they've never done it themselves. This is far too common in the world today, and it's why I don't tolerate people that leave comments in my videos when they tell me, when they're critical of me, when they themselves have no videos and they themselves are using an anonymous name and have no picture of who they are, and there's no way to verify that they have any experience behind to back up what they're saying, right? And so for them, they get their comment deleted and they get blocked from the channel because I don't need people like that in my life. I can live my life just fine without those people in it. They will not even be missed. I won't even know they're gone. So I hope none of you are like that. The blue guy fell down. You're talking about Mr. Meeseeks behind me. He fell down a few days ago. I left him down. Let me take a quick look here. Somebody's bringing up some donations may have been made while I wasn't looking. I want to give a shout out, and of course anybody who makes who contributes to the channel, I want to acknowledge them. I want to say thank you. And I'm sure that it's somewhere in here. There's a history of payments that are made. I just don't know. Oh, here we go. Paul Vreeland donated $5 and said, people don't value proactive maintenance these days. Throwaway society doesn't think about maintenance. It applies to IT, cars, homes, etc. Well, again, when we talk about, first of all, thank you for the contribution. When we talk about preventive maintenance, by the way, there's two ways you could say this word: preventative maintenance or preventive maintenance. They're both in the dictionary. Preventative is such an ugly word. Preventive, much nicer word. Preventive maintenance. Sort of like regardless and irregardless. Flammable and inflammable. Anyway, don't get me started. It costs businesses money. Businesses cannot afford the throwaway mentality because systems have to be configured with antivirus, with programs, email, the things that a business needs to run. And when an employee can't work and that employee is still getting paid, it's costing the business lost productivity and wages. So companies absolutely do not support the throwaway mentality. That's a consumer attitude. And when you are a working computer technician, one of the reasons you hear a lot of computer technicians saying that the repair industry is dying is because they work on the residential side. So yes, on the residential side, people still need their data backed up. They still need their programs reinstalled. They still need their printers rehooked up. They still need their email reconfigured. But a lot of stuff's going web-based now, right? So for a lot of people with Gmail, it doesn't matter if they buy a new computer. They still have access to the Gmail. And with Windows 10, it may even auto-install their printer for them when they plug it in. So there becomes less need to call the tech. However, still occasions when they do. And a lot of consumers have moved away from PCs and into tablets and smartphones because they're just consuming. It's the people who are creating, and those are generally businesses. The businesses that are creating lose money when they're unable to create. And so the throw-it-away mentality does not exist in business. It absolutely does not exist. And when you're a technician and you hear the stories of other techs promoting and endorsing this false information that the business is dying, it's really upsetting to me. Because if you don't do work for a company, if all you do is work for residential consumers, as far as I'm concerned, you're not a real technician. Because you weren't hired by a corporation. A corporation knows what they're doing when they hire you, right? They know they need you to be able to accomplish certain tasks, and they're going to measure you against their expectations. A consumer has no idea what you do. They're not going to verify any claims of your experience or education. They don't have the means to do that. And they have no idea when you're done if you did the job right or not. All they know is it was broken and now it's working, so I guess you did your job. How thorough your job was, or if you would have left a virus behind that's still perhaps spying on the user, but you don't have the experience to know it, and the consumer doesn't notice it, and ignorance is bliss, and you get paid and everybody's happy. That's not a real computer tech. A real computer tech does work for businesses, and businesses are critical. And a business will sue you. A business will take you out of business if you are incapable of performing the job duties for which you were hired. Or if you go to work as an employee for a company, you had to go through the interviewing process, which includes background check and drug tests and verification that you understand the needs of the company with regards to their IT infrastructure. That's all verified before you're offered the position, which makes you a real tech. But somebody who just says, hey, I decided I'm a tech today, put an ad on Craigslist and went over and fixed some senior's computer, we need another word. They're often called pizza techs. Pizza techs are the derogatory term used by professional techs when we talk about the lesser techs. And what I don't like to do is bully people in any way, shape, or form, but I also don't like people misrepresenting, lying, or misleading. And unfortunately, the people that are doing it fully believe that they're computer techs. So they fooled themselves. They believe their own nonsense, and as a result, get other people to believe them. And they are able, oftentimes, to run a sustainable business that way in that segmented market. And then when that market starts to dry up, they're the ones going online and saying the business is dying. Repair business and IT is not dying, it's only getting bigger. And the need for technicians in corporate environments is only growing. There's more and more companies today than there has been in the history of mankind. There are more computers today than there are in the history of mankind. And companies need to stay in business. And unless the company is in the business of providing support, they need somebody to maintain the computers, to do whatever it is they do. And computers are part of every business. Computers are part of a car mechanic business. Computers are part of a tax accounting business. Any business uses a computer. And any time away spent doing the job of the business, maintaining their own computers to save money, is costing them more than they're saving. So just looking back here at the chat, let's see. Are SSDs coming down in price? Yeah, absolutely. Well, graphics cards, GPUs, have been going up in price because of Bitcoin miners. SSDs have been coming down. The Crucial MX300, it's a 525 gig solid state drive, routinely sells for $159.95. And on sale, it runs on sale a couple times a year for $135 for a 525 gig solid state drive. It's not the fastest. I don't know about reliability, but it is going to be a lot faster than any mechanical drive. So I'm just looking back through the chat to see if there's any other. If you have a question particularly related to data backup, data recovery, data destruction, please post your question in the chat, and I will do my best to get to it. What do you think about using a 1 terabyte old SATA hard drive as a backup source, but on the power going to the old hard drive on a manual switch? Any backup is better than no backup. I don't know that if something is important to you enough to back up that you're putting it on the cheapest thing you can find. It's a little contradictory, but it's better than nothing. Not much better than nothing, but better than nothing. Somebody's saying in the chat room, something I agree with right here. This is from Ed. The best upgrade you can do to a PC is to replace your mechanical hard drive with a solid state drive as your boot drive. 100%. 100%. That is correct. The simple best performance upgrade you can give your computer that you will actually notice, I guarantee you'll notice it, is to replace, if you still have an old mechanical drive, dump it. Solid state drives are cheaper than ever. You can routinely get a 250 gig drive for $99 or less. Even a good Samsung, like an 850 Evo, for $99, 250 gigs, super fast, super reliable. It'll run 4 times faster than your mechanical drive. Whether it's a laptop or a desktop, you will see a screaming difference in performance. Also, if you have a laptop, you'll also see longer battery life. You'll generally have much better reliability. Solid state drives are far, far more reliable than mechanical drives. So they use less power, they're quieter, they don't make any sound at all, and they run cooler. Does there come a point where a computer can be too old to benefit from a solid state drive? If the computer has SATA ports, because all SSD drives are SATA only. It will benefit from the from a solid state drive. How much? You're not going to, so SATA 1, if you have an original SATA port, can only transfer 150 megabytes per second. It's pretty slow, but chances are the mechanical drive you've got in there probably is only transferring at 60. So you're not going to get 4 times the speed of what you have, but you'll more than double it. So yes, it's still worth the upgrade. And furthermore, when you do upgrade that computer to a more modern machine, you can reuse that solid state drive. Take it out, and it'll be one less thing you have to buy on your new machine. And instead of running at 150 megabytes a second, it'll run at 600 megabytes per second. And you get all the full benefit. So it's not as though you have to throw it away with the machine. Just when you're done with the machine, take it out, put it in your new machine. I have a SATA 2 PC, but can't find SATA 2 SSD. No, you're not going to find you wouldn't want a SATA 2 SSD. You buy right now, the only SSD you're going to buy is SATA 3, and it is backwards compatible. It'll work on SATA 2 or 1. It's just bottlenecked by the controller at that point. So even though the drive, you have a Ferrari, the Ferrari can do 200 miles an hour, but you're driving it on the freeway at rush hour, you're not going to go faster than the car in front of you. It's not a problem with the Ferrari. You're just going to drive 20 miles an hour for the next hour because there's a sea of cars all moving at 20 miles an hour, and you can't go any faster than the car ahead of you. But then when you get off the freeway and you get on a racetrack, then you can push the gas pedal down and zoom and take off. So again, with a solid state drive, you're only going to get the best performance that the motherboard controller or the hard drive controller can allow for. But when you upgrade later on down the line, at some point you're going to upgrade, take that drive out, and utilize it in your new build. Or even if you buy a used computer that's still old, but it's newer than what you had, throw it in there. Even if it's still not running at SATA 3, it'll still be faster than any mechanical drive. Carrie, when recovering data, is it also possible to bring the virus or malware with it? Well, a virus or malware is nothing more than a program. So when you're doing data recovery, you're looking at file names. Generally, when people do data recovery, they're looking for files the customer made. So that would be documents, pictures, music, things of that nature. You don't really recover Windows. We just reinstall Windows. But what happens if one of those documents is virus infected? Now, we're talking about 2 different things here, right? What you're suggesting is you have a virus on a hard drive that the hard drive then failed. So remember, a hard drive is hardware and a virus is software. Those are 2 individual problems. It is unlikely that you will ever experience both problems simultaneously. There is no software that can break hardware. Well, I'll take that back. There's no software that can break consumer hardware. We get into the industrial stuff, robotics, that's different. But when it comes to what you and I can download from the internet, there's nothing you can download from the internet that can break your hard drive. No software exists that can break your hard drive. So what about a virus-infected file on a hard drive that failed and was sent in for data recovery, or you're doing the data recovery yourself? Can you recover a virus-infected file and recover the virus? Yes. Yes. And that is why anybody who does data recovery does it on a machine that has antivirus that won't allow that file to be saved, or it'll try and strip the virus away and clean the file if possible, or otherwise it quarantines the file. So that's why anybody who does data recovery, the master machine that's doing it will have antivirus on it every time. And generally speaking, the files themselves, so let's say you've got a Word document, right? And let's say that Word document has an infection. And let's just say that you've recovered it without antivirus. When you go to load that Word document, so the virus itself doesn't activate until you run it. So when you go to run that Word document, on the machine you run it on should have antivirus, it should flag it. Otherwise, if you're running a modern version of Microsoft Office, it'll say things trying to run macros, and macros are disabled by default. And unless you say, no, I want to run it, then you purposely are running the virus. Well, you've been warned not to. So it's an extraordinary amount of ignorance and bad luck that would have to take place for both of those things to happen, or all three of those things to happen. You can have viruses on your hard drive that, if they're not running, it's just like a program. A virus is a program. If you don't run the program, it's just data sitting on a hard drive, not causing any harm. It's when the program runs. And a virus is just a program, and that program can often be shut down in Task Manager. Some of them are a little more sophisticated with rootkits and things like that, but it's just a piece of software, and it can be shut down and it can be removed. It's not like bacterial infections where human beings get viruses or viral infections. That's a different type of virus. Virus is just it's a layman's term for a malicious piece of software or malware. So one of the things I see in the chat room is different definitions of what people think is funny. So when somebody says, oh, you just format your hard drive, they think they're being funny when they don't realize they're being extraordinarily dangerous. Because people who don't know, people who are not at the same educational experience level as you, don't know you're joking. So while you're getting a good chuckle out of it, there's somebody else who is unable to discern real help from sarcastic help. That's just not funny, and it doesn't benefit anybody in any way, shape, or form, except maybe yourself, which makes you really selfish and inconsiderate. It seems like it's getting harder and harder to have a sense of humor nowadays because while jokes are meant with the best of intention, sometimes they can have some horrible side effects, whether it's Kathy Griffin holding up a mock head of Donald Trump, where everybody overreacts, in my opinion, to that, or it's any joke is always at somebody's expense. And the people now that are typically the ones that the jokes are made of are growing stronger in numbers and voice. And hallelujah, it's about time. There's got to be a better type of humor we can come up with than by making fun of somebody because of their height or the way they look, their race, their intelligence, their financial means. They're hurtful. I do think it's important we're able to laugh at ourselves, and we should certainly be able to laugh at ourselves before we laugh at anybody else. But this isn't a stand-up comedy channel, so when people post things that are dangerous in the chat room because they think it's funny, a lot of people can't tell you're not being serious, and it's a good way to get yourself kicked out, even though that wasn't your intention. So best to just keep that to yourself. If you have real help, real suggestions, they're always welcome. And if you can say something funny that doesn't hurt anybody's feelings and isn't a dangerous thing that's funny because it's dangerous, those kind of things are friendly things are always welcome. Have you seen the new AMD processor? I have not had anybody order one from me yet. Is there a standalone unit that can clone a hard drive without using a computer? Yeah, there are a lot of hardware hard drive cloners out there. When I worked way back in the 90s for the power company, we had a big cloning station where we could take one master drive and up to 20 blank drives and clone that one to all 20 at the same time. Because all the desktops had the same configuration, they all had the same hardware. All we had to do was make a few minor changes to the image, and we were installing new workstations. You know, we had 5,000 employees at this one location, and I think they have 400 locations. It may not have been 400, it may have been 130. I don't remember. It was a lot of satellite offices, right? And especially when we were doing the upgrade to Windows 95, we were moving people into Windows 95. The cloning workstations were awesome, but very expensive. One of the units I'm hearing a lot of people talk about, it looks just like this. It's a little red box, and you plug your source drive on one side and your target drive on the other, and you push the button and you let it run. And it's called, I think I have it on my Amazon page. I can tell you who makes it. I've never used a hardware drive cloner. They also have the drive toasters that you've seen me use, the USB drive docks. And those often, they sell them with 2 bays, and you can just hit a button to clone that way. StarTech makes them, Initech makes it, Sabrent makes it. A company called YKS. If you go to Amazon and just type in drive cloner, tons of units will come up, and different shapes, different sizes, different capacities. Some do 1-to-1, some do 1-to-2, 1-to-4, 1-to-10, 1-to-100. I mean, they have huge drive docks available. I did a review of StarTech USB SATA IDE StarTech Drive Cloner hard drive duplicator dock, and I hated it. I just thought it was junk. It was slow, it was unreliable, it got really hot, and I ended up selling that on eBay. And the one that I don't have experience with, but I've heard about 3 or 4 techs really talk well of it. They're really like loving their unit. I'm trying to think. God, here's one. There's an SD and micro SD drive memory card reader duplicator. It does 1-to-63. So not just hard drives. And of course it'll work with, the ones that do hard drives work with mechanical drives or solid state drives, desktop or laptop drives. Sometimes you have to buy additional adapters for all of that, and sometimes they come with them. It just depends on the unit. And I'm just trying to look for the specific one. Well, this looks like the one I used at the power company. This one does SATA and serial attached SCSI called a Z-Clone XI. It's $5,300. But typically, the one that's red, and it's almost the same size and shape, it's made by... The name is right on the tip of my tongue. Let me go back in the chat and see if anybody is. The reason I don't use a hard drive cloner is because Acronis works so well for me. I don't need it. It's just an added expense. They cost about $250 for a unit like this, where it's a 1-to-1 drive clone, and I'm just trying to find the name of it. Jimmy, what are you doing, Jimmy? Jim? Come here, buddy. People say they're hearing the dogs. Come up here. Come here. Up. Come here. Say hello. Come up. Come here. Come here. Say hello. You got to get up. They can't see you down there. Don't make me pick you up. Come here. Come on. Up. I guess he's being camera shy. He's walking around here. Good boy. He's fattening up real nice, too. Good boy. Yes. The drive cloner. What is it called? This is killing me. And now he's thirsty. Looking for... Boy, this is really frustrating to not find that drive cloner. I thought it would have come up on an Amazon search, but instead I'm going to do a Google search, hardware drive cloner. Let's see if it'll come up that way. And then I'm just going to hit the shopping tab in Google and just look for a picture of it. Boy, this one looks just like it. Who makes this one? That's not it. Oh, Kangaroo makes one. Kanguru. They make some really nice stuff, but it's really expensive. Their one-to-one hard drive duplicator is $500. The one I was looking for, as I recall, it's red, and it sells for about $250. And I never heard of it before. It was a tech forum I belong in, and they were talking about it. And I guess it lets you make images, like pre-install images, that you can then build on from there. Nothing I have time for. It takes so much time to make your pre-install images, I might as well just install for as often as I do it. StarTech has a couple standalone ones. The StarTech one looks just like it. And presumably the new StarTech one is a lot better than the old StarTech one that I had, because the old one was just horrible. You know, Acronis is $20. You can get it on sale for $20. And you can certainly get it cheaper than Acronis Direct, because Acronis Direct is $50. I think Amazon Acronis is... let's just see how much it is on Amazon. TrueImage 2017 is $31.99, and then you can use the computer you have now with a USB drive dock and just do it that way. Or take an old computer you have laying around. If you have an old Core 2 Duo or an old useless machine, just throw Windows 7 on it or something, or Windows 10, whatever, and then throw Acronis on it and make that your hardware cloning station. It's just not very portable that way. If you want that portable solution, you certainly want to look at a unit that I'm trying to find that looks like that. Let me try somewhere else. Let's look in... I just don't think I'm going to find it this quickly. Facebook needs a way to search within a particular group. Oh, they do have it. Let's type in cloner. Ah, there it is. It's called a Goblin. That's what I was looking for. So the Goblin hard drive, let's see, a Goblin cloner. Let's just Google that. Hard drive duplicators. No, best clone. No. Let's go to Amazon and look for it there. I'll just type in Goblin hard drive. And I'm getting a bunch of books. Goblin cloner. Well, maybe Amazon's not selling it anymore. So let's just do a Google search for Goblin hard drive cloner. There it is. It's from a company called UReach Inc. And techs have been talking really well about this. I've not used one myself. Let me put a link in the chat for you guys. And that is the unit. I thought it was red, but this one looks a little different. Maybe they've recently updated it. But you're not running any software. It's just a unit. It's about the same size and shape as this, a little LCD screen just like this. You plug your source drive on one side, your target drive on the other side, and the drives actually just push right onto the sides. It's SATA only. And it'll do 3.5-inch drives or 2.5-inch drives, mechanical or SSD. It says it supports IDE, MSATA, SATA DOM, eSATA, IVDR, M.2 with the next-gen form factor or NGFF, and microSATA with the purchase of additional adapters for each of those devices. That's really cool. So that can get real expensive if you buy all the adapters. And I don't see prices listed here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say it's called an image maker, not a cloner. So Goblin image maker, and then I'm going to hit the shopping tab on Google. Google's not really helping me here, not on the shopping tab. Not exactly sure where people are buying them. They might be buying them direct from uReach. I might reach out to uReach to maybe see if they'll send me a unit for reviewing, but I'm so backed up on the number of reviews I've got to do now. I really don't need another company breathing down the back of my neck going, hey, when are you going to get that review done? And as I've said and as I've demonstrated in past videos, Acronis works so well for me. I don't know what motivation I have to get a device like this for cloning. A device like this for erasing, that's valuable for the type of work I do. And maybe for the type of work other techs do. Clearly the Goblin is a solution for them, because on Facebook, let me go back into that group I was in, and I just want to tell you what these guys are saying about the Goblin, because I'd never heard of it before. And of course these folks are from all over the world, so it may be that the device is more popular in Europe or in the UK. Here's one where the guy says, I love my HDD Goblin. Monitoring software alerted me that the main drive in the server was sending smart info that it was going bad. I took the server down, pulled the hard drive, connected it and the new drive to the Goblin, and in about 10 minutes, the drive was ready to go. Server booted right up and it's running flawlessly. Someone says, can anyone clone an NVMe drive with the Goblin? Oh, it appears StarTech's new hard drive cloner is the Goblin relabeled. And it is available on Amazon. And looks, somebody's just verifying that. Somebody says they just do images. This person is saying, well, with the Goblin, the idea is that you can have a library of drives, so you no longer need to do fresh, full installs. You just have to do a quick image from your library drive to your customer's drive. SATA to SATA is much quicker. Saving time makes you money. Cloning and image deployment are two different functions. The Goblin makes short work of either task. And on Amazon, the StarTech Standalone hard drive duplicator is $283.99. Let me give you guys a link to the StarTech duplicator. It looks exactly like the Goblin. It looks like they just changed the label on the front of it. So here is the StarTech Drive duplicator right there. So you guys can have that link in the chat room right now. So again, I don't have any use for those, but I can certainly understand why some techs would, depending on the kind of work that you do. So starting us off talking about data destruction. Data destruction is, it's incredibly important for certain industries, people in financial industries, medical industries. When they're replacing a computer or replacing a hard drive, upgrading a hard drive, whether you're using mechanical drive, solid state drive, it's really critical that all the data gets destroyed for legal purposes, let alone just it's morally and ethically the right thing to do. And as a technician, we're always looking for ways of adding value and services for our customers so that we can make more money, but ultimately that we have a customer that can have one-stop shopping. I don't have to say, I don't do that. I never want to tell a customer, I don't do that. I like to be able to provide my customer every solution possible so that I become a one-stop shop and increase the amount of money I can make. And so having a device like this makes it real easy to tell people, look, you're a consumer, you've got an old computer, you want to make sure your drive's erased, what do? I say, well, you can take the drive out and smash it with a hammer, or have the drive removed and drop it off to me, and I'll do it for 20 bucks. I'll securely erase the drive, and I'll recycle the drive for you for $20. That's a bargain. Nobody's going to charge you $20. But honestly, to just plug it in and let it run, it's easy 20 bucks, and my customer has peace of mind, and the customer is going to come back to me for the next thing. I don't want to tell my customer, take it somewhere else. I'll give my customer the option. If you want to do it yourself, take it out and smash it with a hammer. Otherwise, I can take care of it for 20 bucks. And if it's a business that requires, proof and a certain level of wipe, that's a much more expensive option because of the liability involved. Gville612 just contributed to the channel. Thank you so much. And Gville says, thank you for doing what you do, Kerry. I built 5 PCs for myself and family members by following your build videos and good advice. From a fellow almost 50-something in New Jersey. Well, thank you. I'm also almost 50-something. And it's amazing to me that YouTube shows my analytics being mostly younger folks, and yet when I talk to people in chat or in messages that are left, it's all folks my age. So I don't know who my audience is really. I don't think YouTube's accurate. So I don't know if people are lying when they're creating their accounts, or if there's a miscalculation somewhere, or if it's just that the folks that are being more vocal are older. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. But thank you for the contribution, and I'm so glad to hear that you're enjoying the content and that you have built your own machines. Because once you build your own machines, you'll never buy pre-built. Maybe a laptop. Obviously, if you need a laptop, you're going to have to buy one pre-built. But nothing like having your own desktop. So now we're saying our ages in the chat. So somebody says they're 36, someone else says they're 44, someone else says they're 28, 38, 70. Good. 73, 27. So it looks like we've got late 20s. There's 53, 28, 51. I haven't really seen, we got a 120-year-old, a 17-year-old. 70, 69, 17, 19, 33, 64, 48, 57. There's definitely more people aged 40 and up in the chat room than there are 39 and down. Everybody's always welcome, but that's very interesting to me. I talk to everybody the same. I was filming for Newegg. Okay, guys. Okay, enough with the ages. We get it. We're good. I was at Newegg, and they had a crew there, for doing the filming. And there was a young Asian kid there that was doing some camera work. And the crew was always different. Every time I went, there was always a different camera guy, different sound guy. And I always talk to everybody the same. I just treat people the way I want to be treated. And I don't really see age. Unless somebody says something really immature, then I can say, okay, well, they're a kid, But until they do that, I give them the benefit of the doubt. Some kids are very mature for their age. Anyway, there was a kid he was of Asian descent. And the reason I bring that up is because of what happened. We were working together. I'd never met him before, and just, I don't want to be the on-air talent guy that's a jerk, And it's these people's job to make me look and sound good. So you don't want to talk down to them, or because they're the ones that ultimately are in control of your microphone and your lighting and camera placement. And ultimately, again, I just want to treat people the way I'm treated. And I said, we've had a long day. Let's all go to lunch. I'll pay. I'll buy. It's on me. So we loaded up. We went to Buffalo Wild Wings or something. It's down the street from Newegg's offices. And the kid says to me, he says, I don't know who you are, and I've never met you before, but I just want you to know I really appreciate that you talk to me as though I'm your equal. And I looked at him, and I just, without missing a beat, I just said, you are my equal. I don't know what's happened in your life where you feel you've been discriminated against because of your ethnicity or your age, but you shouldn't let those people get to you. My advice for you is for anybody, whoever treats you that way, just figuratively speaking, run right over them. Just go right over them. I said, furthermore, when you start your own company and you get really successful, I want you to hire me to be your IT guy. Because this kid was talking about getting out of the filmmaking stuff and starting like an energy drink company. And I said, you should totally, if that's what you want to do, you should totally pursue that. And when you're big enough and you need an IT guy, I'll come work for you. And I wasn't saying that to be nice. I was saying that because I'm sincere. Like, what a great way to get a job. Planting some seeds for the future. And for all the people that were telling this kid, based on the way he looked or his age or whatever it was, that he wasn't good enough, I know what that feels like. I don't want to be treated like that. Why would I treat anybody like that? And I was really touched and kind of bothered that just, spending a day with this guy, that he felt it really important to tell me how much he appreciated it. It meant, to me, it was just a conversation. I didn't think anything of it. To him, it was like, wow, you're treating me just like everybody else. I didn't. So I like to think I treat people that way. That was confirmation. But, it's really easy to prophesize failure. Anybody can do that. Support people. Say, yeah, you can do it. You know what? At the very least, if you don't want to help, just get out of their way. You don't have to tell them they can't do it. You don't have to tell them they're losers. You don't have to, there's no effort required in that. So just say, encourage, support, and if you can't do it, don't say anything at all. Just don't get involved. But to discourage, disparage, or otherwise talk poorly of somebody, there's nothing to be gained from that. And the effect that we have on each other's lives is profound. And if you don't believe me, try this little experiment. Next time you're out in public, walking around shopping in the mall or whatever, Walmart, and you see somebody, you can smile. And there's a good chance they will smile back at you. Why? What causes that? We have this really strange effect on each other, complete strangers we don't even know, that you can get on a bus and just make eye contact with somebody for just a brief moment and give them a nod, and they will probably nod right back. And it takes as much effort to do that as it does to insult, degrade, or otherwise put somebody down and completely affect their mood the other way. So why would we choose the negative one over the positive one when they both take the same amount of energy, the same amount of effort? But one has a positive influence that makes two people feel good, and putting somebody down may make you feel better about yourself, but it puts them down. It's like a teeter-totter or a seesaw. One goes up, one goes down. The other way, both go up at the same time, which makes you feel better, makes them feel better. And it's totally up to you. And I encourage you to, if you don't believe me, try it. It's an amazing effect. And you're not necessarily going to make a new friend, but in that little moment that you have together, two human beings in that moment, just kind of shared that little wordless smile or nod and got on the same page that I don't know why I like that person. I just feel like I like them. It's incredible. I'm just looking back here at the chat. Jerry Berg, known as Barnacles Nerdgasm. I've talked about this other YouTuber that reminds me a lot of me in that he talks tech based on ethics and morals and not based on sponsors. and he covers a lot of things about his personal life, his struggles with his weight. He just really he seems very honest and very open, and I see a lot of myself in him, and I'd certainly love to do a collab with him, but I've not been able to get any response from him. But regardless, that's fine. If you're looking for another YouTube channel similar to mine, look for Barnacules Nerdgasm. And he used to be, he was like employed by Microsoft for 15 years, and then he was laid off. I just find a kindred spirit in this guy, and I really like his channel. Carrie, what are your thoughts when you see teenage girls addicted to their phones? I don't see specifically teenage girls addicted to their phones. I see everybody addicted to their phones, regardless of age or gender. And, you know, you guys, you young folks may not realize this, but us older folks think you're all pretty stupid. When we see this, we wonder what's so important that's all you do all day. It's not like you did it for 5 minutes. And we know when we grew up, we didn't have that. You know, one of the things that, it's interesting, we never had to make sure our phone was on the charger before we went to bed. That just wasn't a thing. So when you talk to, okay, so when I was growing up, they had sort of the invention of the portable calculator, and it was like $1,500 for a calculator. And then the prices started to come down, and you could get a calculator for $20. And some teachers would let you use it in high school, but you had to be able to show your work because you weren't always going to have a calculator with you in real life. Well, yeah, actually you are. So what ends up happening is people of my generation, or even of the older generation before me, we see the kids of today who don't know basic math. They appear to be really lazy. And when we talk about millennials, we talk about this sort of dumbness that they don't know how to do anything because everything's done for them. I'm pretending this is a smartphone. That everything's being done for them. Math is being done for them. Even when you work at fast food restaurants nowadays, there's a button for a Big Mac. You know, they don't punch in the number. They just hit what the item is, and the machine does all the work. And when I talk to people my age, sharing stories of handing a young person money and they put the number in wrong in the register, and because they put the number in wrong, they can't off the top of their head figure out how much change to give back. And I wish that was an exception to the norm, but this is very, 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 very common today. And it's not to put a blanket over all millennials, but there is certainly a very large portion of millennials where the technology has more or less enabled them to not have to know stuff, to not have to remember things. As long as they've got their phone, they can get everything they need to know. And so what I'll often do is I will remind folks of my generation that we created this. We are the generation that created the internet. We are the generation that created the smartphone. We are the generation that enabled mankind to have this wonderful technology. And what we didn't know when we were creating it is that we would be changing the way the species evolves. Now, from people who grew up with learning how to do things, fixing things by hand, people that know how to work on a car. Very few people know how to work on a car today like they did when I was a kid. You know, when I was 16, 17, 18, all my friends knew how to work on their cars. I would say most kids that age today have no clue. And to me, and this is where age kind of plays into it, knowing how to fix things was part of being a man. You didn't expect a woman to know how to do it. You didn't put any pressure on women to know how to do it. But a woman would expect you, the man, to be able to fix her car, or to fix that leaking faucet. That's what the women expected. This is how we were raised. Now, kids today, because of my generation was all about equality and fairness. The whole gay pride parade stuff, all that, lesbian, gay, equality really started in my generation. And it's grown and expanded wonderfully. Makes people like me very proud that the foundation of the seeds that we planted have continued to evolve and continued to grow, and people are now starting, finally, to be treated fairly and equally and not being bullied or, what's the word I'm looking for? Alienated or there's a word. The word's not coming to me. Being prejudiced against. And well, it still happens today. It doesn't happen like it used to. But I know that when I was growing up, the older generation thought my generation was lazy. When I was growing up, my parents thought the computer was a waste of time. That all you're doing is playing games on it. There was no internet back then. They didn't understand what I was doing on it, but what they did understand was you're going to need to get a job when you get out of school, and you need to focus on your schoolwork, and we're going to take the computer away from you because you're spending too much time on it. Despite the fact I bought the computer with my own saved up paper route money. I had a paper route when I was 10 years old. I used to deliver the paper in the snow. I used to have to collect once a week, knock on door to door and say, you owe me this much money. And then I would have to take that money and split it, how much I owe the newspaper company, and then the rest left over was mine to keep. At 10 years old. And this was done because I wanted to. Nobody made me do it. And not all 10-year-olds had paper routes. I only knew one other kid with a paper route. But what I wanted was a stereo, and nobody just bought me a stereo. If I wanted it, I had to figure out how to get it. So I didn't like doing my paper route. But I did like having money, and that was a way of making money. And then there was a thing called layaway, and I was able to pay like $20 a week until I paid for this stereo. And at 11 years old, I was the only kid I knew with a stereo. So to me, I like to see that kind of ambition in a young child. But there are two forms of thought there that children should play and should enjoy their childhood, because once you start working and having a job, then you're an adult and you'll never go back to being a child ever again. So that should be postponed as long as possible. But then there's people like me who think, no, those children should be made aware and be given a choice and encouraged to work to start earning money early in life so that they're more prepared than their friends that are the same age as them when they exit high school or when they start college, when they get a job. The folks like Mark Cuban who were, started off selling garbage bags door to door when he was a kid, look how successful he is today. But then again, there's another side to the coin. Look at a guy like Martin Shkreli, the pharma bro guy who wasn't brought up with money, but he had a guy in the same apartment he lived in that was a retired, I don't know if he was a medical executive or something, and he taught this kid they would play chess together, he taught him how the industry worked. And this kid turned into a monster, just a horrible monster. So it can work either way, and it's really just opinion. But you'll probably find, if you're a millennial, when you get older and the Generation Z kids are growing up, you'll be like, these kids today. It's almost like a rite of passage, I think. And you shouldn't be offended by it. If anything, it's always been my goal to break the stereotypes of my generation. And I hope that it's important to you to break the stereotypes of your generation. But you should also be aware that your generation, if you're not already aware, has a reputation to the generation before you, all the generations before you. There's a certain stereotype that exists, and it exists for a reason. And I'm one, I like to shatter stereotypes. That's just me personally. I like to be unexpected. Let me look back at the chat here. I used my paper route money to buy a killer stereo system. I bought a Akai and Aculab stereo and speakers. I could not listen to music through headphones or PC. Parents are giving their kids smartphones at such a young age. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a good way to keep track of your kid. My dad once lost me at the state fair. And I walked around for 2 hours around the state fair, Del Mar, California, Del Mar State Fair. My dad actually got in the car, thought maybe I got a lift home from a friend. I don't even know why he thought that. Drove all the way home, found I wasn't there, drove back to the state fair. This whole time, I didn't know he was gone. I'm still walking around the fair looking for him. At one point, I just said, I'm going to stay in one place and eventually he'll walk by me, right? What a nightmare. If I'd had a cell phone, or even a pager back in those days, but they didn't exist. Now that never happens. I mean, it shouldn't happen. You just go, hey, where are you? I'll meet you over by the corn dogs, whatever. That really happened. And it wasn't dangerous. Nobody abducted me. I was probably 15, 16. Maybe I was 14. But I was old enough, walking around the fair by myself. And so we just didn't make plans to meet somewhere at a certain time until we were too far separated to know where the other one was. And my dad didn't know what to do. If he walked around, couldn't find me, he just assumed I must have gone home somehow. Went home, and I'm not there. Drove back. It was an hour drive back and forth. So I'm not opposed to the young kids having phones. It certainly has its place. Looking back through the comments, I made $320 a month on my paper route back in the early 80s in Holland. I had 4 city blocks. The friend that I had a paper route with, she would take every route from any time a kid would quit, she would take their route, and her route just grew and grew and grew. She was probably making over $1,000 a month, and she paid for her own college. She went to UCLA. This is back when I lived in Michigan, remember. She flew out to California, got a dorm, paid for her own education. And today she lives in Brazil, where she chooses to live, in Sao Paulo. She speaks fluent Portuguese and she does engineering. Very smart person. Continues to go to school. Ever since I've known her, she just loves learning, I guess. She teaches and she learns, and she married a Brazilian man who is also a professor who also continues to take classes. And she translates technical documents from Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, in English back and forth, because you have to have an engineering degree to understand the technical documentation in order to translate it correctly. And you have to know the language of both languages that you're translating to and from. Very smart person. I feel bad being called a millennial. Well, you better get over it, because if that's what you are, it's just the area of time that you were born in. It's no different than if you're born in, you have a certain astrological sign. You're Cancer or Sagittarius. It's nothing to feel bad about. It's just it's a way of specifying a generation. In my day, we went on bike rides, outdoors, come home to play on the Atari. Yeah, but that's all we had to do, right? I mean, I rode my bike everywhere when I was a kid. I didn't want to be at home. Now kids don't want to be anywhere but home, generally speaking. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? When it's different from your experience and you're like, I turned out okay, it wasn't so bad for me, why isn't it so bad for you? But different shoes, man. It's different shoes. I agree. I grew up working hard in school, doing match on your own, not using much tech at all. You had to do it all. I didn't have a cell phone. We used paid phone. Yeah. I'm tired of being told I'm lazy and stupid just because I'm 15. When I was 15, what I was told by adults was it must be nice to know everything. I never said I knew everything, but there was this common accepted stereotype of being a teenager in the 80s that adults were all stupid, according to the adults, and that teenagers thought they knew everything, didn't need to listen to the adults. So there were a lot of like bumper stickers, you know, hey, you better move out when you're a teenager and you still know everything. And it used to really offend me because, well, there was a lot of folks in my generation that applied to. It didn't apply to me, but it applied to enough of my generation to create a stereotype to which I was attached. But I found it very offensive, and I understand exactly what you mean as a millennial being told you're lazy because you're 15. Perhaps future generations that will stop eventually. But I think knowledge is power, and if you know that that's going to be the predisposed attitude of most older people towards your generation, and you're offended by it, then you should equally worry about offending somebody in the older generation who isn't like that, and you make the assumption they are. So it works both ways. You can only be the best you can be, and people that are going to be jerks are going to be jerks. And the best thing you can do is be successful. That's the best revenge. Just be successful. Just run right over those people, figuratively speaking, bypass any amount of success they had in their life. And you don't have to say a word. They will see how successful you are, that you are more successful than they ever were. And apparently you weren't as stupid or lazy as they falsely assumed. I'm 15, have my own job. I make $7.60 an hour for 16 hours every other week. I have a debit card under my name. I pay my own Mint SIM with Galaxy S6 that I bought. That's great. Unfortunately, you don't represent the majority of your generation, but that doesn't mean that none of your generation does it. Obviously, you do it. It would be great if that was the normal thing for your generation. Was living in the 80s like what you see in John Hughes movies? Yes, it was. John Hughes amazed me because here was this adult who knew what it was like to be a kid. And I would say the best representation that hits home for me is the movie The Breakfast Club. High school was exactly like that. Exactly. The music played in the movie was music we really listened to. The attitudes of the students was exactly the attitudes that I experienced. The way the kids spoke to each other and treated each other was exactly. And how this older man, John Hughes, knew that was beyond me. And I sat down the other day I was just going to look at Breakfast Club, you know, and I couldn't stop watching it. It's still a very, very good movie today, and I highly recommend it. Now, when you look at other John Hughes movies like Pretty in Pink or Baby's Day Out, which was really bad, he did a couple others. I think he did Home Alone. They weren't very realistic. They were funny for their time. But Breakfast Club, I think, is one of the most powerful, accurate representations of what it was like to be in high school in the 1980s. And if you're really curious about it, go back and watch that movie, and you can watch it like a documentary. It's that accurate, as far as I'm concerned. John Bender? No, there's a character in Breakfast Club, and the guy's the rebel. I was not John Bender. I was I forget the character's name, but I was the nerdy kid. I was Anthony Michael Hall's character. I definitely saw myself as a combination of between Ali Sheedy and Anthony Michael Hall. I was somewhere between those two, but mostly Anthony Michael Hall's character. Fast Times at Ridgemont High was okay. I don't think Fast Times was John Hughes. I have a chance to say thank you to you. You are a great teacher. And it's from Calmuth G. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the kind words. Planes, trains, and automobiles. Yes. John Hughes, what a hilarious movie. That is such a funny movie. And I certainly felt bad for John Candy's character. God, that movie was funny. But again, a little far-fetched. One of my favorite scenes in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is they're going the wrong direction on the freeway. And it's late at night. They can't really see the signs. They don't realize they're heading on to head-on traffic. And some people driving on the proper side of the freeway are yelling at them, roll your window down. And he rolls the window down. They say, you're going the wrong way. And Steve Martin says, what did they say? And John Candy says, I got this. And he's like, yeah, keep drinking more. They said we're going the wrong way, but how could they possibly know where we're going? Yeah, keep drinking, buddy. That's a great line. And then they get into an accident, and I think John Candy was driving, and I think Steve Martin was in the passenger seat. And he clutches onto the dashboard when the car slams. I think he slams the brakes on or something. And after the car comes to a stop, his fingers have dug into the dashboard, and he has to pull them out. They're like click, 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 click. Those are two of my favorite scenes. And then a third part of the movie, which was really powerful, that really connected with me, was Steve Martin was really insulting John Candy. And at one point, my reaction at that point in life was to fight. But John Candy didn't do what I expected him to do. John Candy said, I'm a fat guy. I've been fat all my life. I've been teased and bullied all my life, and I'm used to it. If it makes you feel better about yourself to insult other people, then go ahead and insult me because I'm used to it. And that hit me really, really hard. Because my attitude before that had always been to retaliate. My attitude had never been to just admit, you know what? I've been bullied my whole life, and if you feel like you need to bully somebody, go ahead and bully me, because I'm already battered and beaten and calloused, and you can't hurt me anymore beyond what bullies before you have already done. So keep doing it. That was powerful. And I'll never forget that about that movie. Somebody mentions, they said, I remember coming home and our neighbor asking my father, when are you going to get a garage door opener? And my father said, I've got 3 sitting in the back seat. It does remind me of going with the remote control. A lot of comedians do that joke. When I was growing up, I was the remote control. My dad would clap his hands like the clapper. Get up and change the channel. Get up and turn the volume up. Turn the volume down. That's funny. I was my dad's remote control. There you go. Somebody says, you're not fat. I was quoting John Candy. John Candy was a fat man. Chevy Chase, National Lampoon. Well, yeah, when we're talking about 80s movies, I was specifically mentioning John Hughes movies. I believe Planes, Trains, and Automobiles was a John Hughes movie. It's interesting to me, because the 80s themselves, the time was pretty rough for me. Family didn't have much money. Both parents worked. Parents weren't home. And when they did get home, the last thing they wanted to do was parent. They just wanted to, they've worked a full shift. They want to come home and unwind and not deal with kids fighting and making noise and making messes. And they have very short tolerance for that. And my parents fought a lot of fighting, arguing, yelling, and screaming. So when a lot of people say I have a very calm voice, when I couldn't wait to move out of my parents' house. I couldn't wait. The day couldn't come soon enough. I wanted a job. I wanted to make money, and I wanted to get the heck out of there so that I could have some peace and tranquility, because I was surrounded with chaos and fighting and yelling and screaming and door slamming and plates being thrown. And all I wanted was for me to get away from that, and that's what I have done. So if I seem peaceful and calm to you, it's because I've had my fill of the arguing and the fighting. I don't want any more of it. I'm done with it. and it's not required. You don't have to live your life that way. It's a choice. Gary, have you ever watched a movie called Stand By Me? No, I heard it was a good movie. I know Will Wheaton is in it. I never watched it. What's the best comeback you ever told somebody? Well, I was always very small and I was teased a lot. And so I always had a really good sense of humor. And the way I would react to people making fun of my height was I would make fun of something in return about them. I always, back in the day, I always had a comeback. It didn't even matter if they had a comeback to my comeback, I had another one for them. They never stopped. Like, I would always have the last word. Very quick with that. And it was more of a challenge of who was going to be the, when were you going to finally shut the other guy down, right? And I was very proud of that. But what they were back in the day, I don't remember. I have no idea. I had some good ones, but I don't remember any of them. People say, and I want to clarify this, I've talked about this in the last live broadcast, people say, I think you are very smart. Even when you were young, you were probably a very smart boy. That's kind of you to say, and I want to emphasize that I am not a smart person. I work very hard to hide how dumb I am. And that's what gives me the ambition and the drive to constantly want to learn more. No matter how smart you are, there's always somebody smarter. No matter how dumb you think you might be, there's always somebody that you think is a lot dumber. So this constant measuring of, I don't think any of that matters. I don't think how smart or how dumb, I don't think it matters. I think what matters is that you have a good, strong sense of right and wrong, and that you're happy. Einstein himself said, he was quoted as saying, imagination is more important than intelligence. I agree with that. So that's my philosophy. But I would certainly never go around telling people how smart I am. I don't believe I am. Everything I've learned, you can learn. If I can learn it, anybody can learn it. Carrie, have you thought about teaching at a college or university? Yeah, I've already done that. And it was not a good experience. Well, it was an okay experience, but the internal politics and drama of the folks that coordinated the classes in the upper management is made teaching discouraging. The students were great. The class was great. All right, guys, we're running at 3 hours on the podcast on this vlog, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Any final questions? Let's go ahead and wrap it up now. I want to give a shout out to the folks over at WiebeTech for sending me the drive eraser for me to review. I have a video coming up on this where it'll be a little more detailed and showing how it works. That'll be coming out eventually. The Project Xenos build is still being done. It won't be made available to the public for quite some time. It's very early, parts haven't been installed yet, just kind of doing B-roll shots and intro and doing these other projects, these live podcasts or broadcasts in between takes away from time I could be doing that. There's a balance there that is still a bit of a struggle for me, but like I said, I don't want to abandon any new videos and content because of the build video, and the build video is very important to me and it's taking a lot of time. And then that'll be all released at once publicly when it's done, but it's quite a ways away. Is it possible for you to give a little notice before you go live so it shows up in our subscriptions? I don't, I always, before I go live, you'll see that I give people time to jump in the chat, and usually around 3 to 5 minutes. That says the live stream is starting soon. Prior to that, I probably didn't know I was going to go live. A lot of times when these shows happen, they happen spontaneously, where an opportunity occurs that I didn't know ahead of time was going to occur, and then I think I'm going to take advantage of that and broadcast. And so that's why it happens. Perhaps I will be able to do like a normal Saturday at 3 o'clock type thing or something, but for right now, that's not been solidified yet. My life is still a little chaotic. I can't control when customers are going to call and need help, and I have to prioritize the customers, the paying customers, opposed to a free vlog. I do enjoy doing these though, and I'm so glad you guys have joined me for it. And I see a $5 contribution has been made here by Michael. Michael says, being disabled, I've wanted to work since I was 16. I hate being made to feel like I'm a leech off the system. You know, I think that's a good attitude to have to a certain extent. I mean, if people are going to offer help, and there's certainly no harm in asking for help, don't let your pride get in the way of that. But there's nothing I hate worse than somebody who uses their disability as an excuse. We all have disabilities. Everybody is disabled. We hide it. A lot of us can hide our disabilities. Some of us have physical disabilities, which are much more difficult to hide. Although even those with physical disabilities often do their best to try and hide them. But I can tell you with myself, with dealing with OCD and anxiety and panic attacks and perhaps agoraphobia, sensory processing disorder, these are things that I have learned in life to hide because you got teased, bullied, made fun of for it. Even as an adult, it continues to happen with the food issues I have, or that I don't like things touching, OCD stuff. And when somebody has a physical impairment, oftentimes I think they feel like they're really different from other people, but in fact we're all more or less the same. We all have disabilities, and some of us are just better at hiding them than others. And what I've learned is, you put me in a room full of strangers and I won't talk to anybody. Somebody can talk to me, and that's fine, but I don't want to bother somebody. I don't want to walk up to somebody and say, hey, how's it going? And they're like, oh gosh, this guy. I don't want to be that guy. So as a result, if you put me in a room full of strangers, I will stand in a corner and kind of avert my eyes, and people go, he's so outgoing, that's so weird. But it's something I struggle with, and it just means I have to work harder at it, right? It's not an exemption from being social. It means I have to work harder than most people at that thing. And the things that are easy for me, perhaps other people have to work harder at. That's the world we live in, and it affects all of us. Regardless of your disability, you have your strengths. Regardless of my disabilities, I have my strengths. We all have what we call disabilities, are considered weaknesses. Some people with disabilities consider their disabilities their strength. So a lot of it is just nothing more than attitude. Do I work on tablets? No, tablets and smartphones, they're so inexpensive. There's not a lot of money to be made. It's very easy to break these things. And then, of course, if you're buying your customer a new one because you broke it, it's not a very sustainable business model. So I'll let other people do that work. I don't want to do it. Harris, Andrew, you are a great role model. I want to thank you for being willing to share your experience so others can learn. Scott says, I have full-blown depression. I've tried to kill myself many times. People just don't understand what it's like. I pretty much use electronic repair and technology to keep me from killing myself. Well, depression's a pretty big deal, and I don't want to come off in any way, shape, or form to say I understand, because I don't. All I can tell you is I've been there for different reasons, and these things that make you depressed, you need to find a distraction in your life. I've found, from my experience, a lot of people who are bored and have nothing to do are depressed and want to die. And a lot of people who are really busy don't have time to think about that. They're so focused on the job they're doing or the job they have to do that they don't have time. So find a distraction. You're using electronics, that's great. Is it enough? I mean, if you're still depressed, you have to help yourself. Ultimately, your happiness is your own responsibility. It's not mine. It's not your brother's or your neighbor's or your parents'. It's up to you. And I found that it can be a downward spiral, right? So when you're depressed, you think, well, what's the point? I could go exercise and feel better about myself physically, but I really don't feel like it. And it seems like a lot of work. And you just keep talking yourself down and down and down and down. It just goes down and down, endless. It's just a bottomless pit. And you have to change that. So how do you do it? You just do it. Even though your body, your brain may be telling you, this is a waste of time, don't bother. You have to learn how to tune that out and do it anyway, as though it was a job that you didn't like doing, but you had to do it. And it's like you go to the gym. For me, it was going to the gym when I was younger. The idea of going to a gym and lifting weights seems pointless, not accomplishing anything. And then the next day I'm feeling sore, and it's like, why did I do that to myself? But I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it again. It requires a certain amount of strong will and stubbornness. I'm going to do this again. And then I would start coming home from the gym, and the next day I didn't feel sore, and I'd be like, I must not have done it right. I must not have had a good workout. I should be feeling sore, and I missed feeling sore. And then if I got sick and I just didn't go to the gym, I felt like I was missing something, and then I got depressed. And what made me feel better was going back to the gym. It sort of, after a certain, you create a new habit. You create this new desire you didn't have before. But for me, it was the gym. For you, it could be something else. I don't know you, but I can assure you there's something in your life that you need to go get, and you need to turn off the voice or ignore that. You can't turn the voice off, but you can acknowledge it and then go do what you know is the right thing to do. Even though every ounce of your being is like, this is pointless, you do it anyway. And after you do it a certain number of times, that other voice kind of fades out. It just happens naturally. And there are certainly people you can talk to, but ultimately it's really on you. You have full control of that. And it's not easy, but nothing worth doing is ever easy. There's been no real sense of accomplishment you can feel than something that's really difficult. You know, people die climbing Mount Everest, but those who make it to the top, wow. I have Asperger's syndrome. I embrace it. It makes me feel creative. I'm good at music, painting, and drawing, and photos, so I find nothing wrong with it. Yeah, you know, same thing. So, what some people think is a weakness, it could be your strength. Carrie, you're taking time to reach out and help people you don't even know. It's really uplifting, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Carrie, can you do car maintenance videos? There's already some engine rebuild videos. I'll be doing more with Subaru Mike, so there'll be Subaru focused videos. But Mike had moved about 2 hours away, and now he's recently moved back. So I'm hoping we can continue to make some more car repair videos. I do want to say, I do want to talk about this about suicide. People that kill themselves piss me off. There's this argument that it's a cowardly way out, and I don't agree with that. I do agree with that somebody has reached what they think is the, like, I can't take anymore. You can take more. I promise you. You can take a lot more. It's just this attitude that you've convinced yourself, I can't do this anymore. You can. You absolutely can. And it'll be totally worth it. Sometimes, the best way I can explain it, sometimes you're in a storm. You're outside in the middle of a huge storm, big hurricane. The wind and gale are blowing at your face and it's freezing cold, and all you can do is wrap yourself up, stick your head down, and keep walking forward. And sooner or later, eventually, you will get to the outside of that storm, but you have got to keep moving forward. If you give up, you're done. And while that may not seem like such a bad thing for you, I assure you there are people who care about you and it will devastate them. So if you won't do it for yourself, do it for the others. Don't do that to other people and hope nobody does that to you. That was sort of my kind of take on it. Eric has contributed to the channel, Eric Crump. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. Scott's got some kind words to say in the chat. Suicidal people are in so much pain, the suicide seems to be the only thing that will stop the pain. Yes, the key word in that statement is seems. You can take more. And you need to invest in yourself. And when you think you can't go on, I assure you, you can. You are capable of doing amazing things, whether you realize it or you don't. We all are. And you just have to dig down deep. And I think the best thing that the best revenge you can get if life has got you down is to be happy. That's the best kind of in your face. You know what? Despite everything you were doing to me, life, I'm going to laugh and smile anyway. And I think that's the best revenge, not killing yourself. Killing yourself is doing what it wants you to do, right? Life is unfair and life is pain. But you know what? I'm going to laugh and smile in spite of it. One of my favorite scenes, and we go back to the 80s movies, there's a scene in Rambo where he's being electrocuted. They've got him tied up and they're sending voltage through him, torturing him. And they go, "Are you ready to talk?" And he says, "Is that all you got?" Despite the fact the pain is clearly extraordinary. He is screaming out in pain. He says, "What else? Is that it? Is that all you have?" I love that attitude. I love the attitude of not giving what people want, you know, not being a puppet, not being life's puppet, not being another person's puppet. I admire, and granted, it's just a movie and it didn't really happen. But you know, there are people out there that are like that. There are people out there that they could barely be able to stand up after they just took a beating, and they're just blood everywhere, and they kind of get back up on their feet and they go, "You hit like a little girl." I love that. And I think if you want to give life the middle finger, smile and laugh. That's the best revenge. All right, well, what started out about data recovery, data destruction, and backups has somehow turned into a philosophy of life, but I hope it was all helpful. I hope it was inspiring. I hope that if you are incapable, if you honestly believe that you are incapable of, you know, if you're contemplating ending your life, you need to find some help. Please find some help. Don't just end it all. That's going to come in time anyway. Don't worry about that. That'll happen automatically. You don't need to encourage that. Down the road, we all go. You'll have your turn. But until then, don't take shortcuts. Don't cut in the line. That's rude. And if it's too much for you to handle, ask for help. There's no shame in that at all. No shame. But I know you can do it. And you can get through, you can weather the storm and come out the other side, and you won't regret it. And you're fully capable. And sometimes people need a helping hand. People can find that helping hand in numerous ways, whether it's local religious organizations or friends, family, people who can understand your situation to help you. But I know you can do it yourself. Kind of sucks. It's so worth it, though. So worth it to come through the other side. There's so many great things that you will experience later on that if you end it now, you'll never know. So there's moments I've had in my life where I said, you know, I'm glad I didn't follow through when I was younger, because I would be missing this thing I'm experiencing now if I had. So you're strong, you're stronger than you think, and you can change your thinking. You can recognize when that voice is being negative, and you can change that voice. You can counter that voice and say, no, I'm not listening to you. And every negative, just make a promise to yourself, every time I have a negative thought, I'm going to replace it with, I'm going to think of something I can be grateful for. You know, there's plenty that you've got in your life that I'm sure you appreciate having. A roof over your head, food in your belly, whatever it is, your favorite thing that you like to eat, a pet, something. Parents, a loved one, children, friends. There's always something to be grateful for. And it might require a little effort from some people to think about it, but it's there. Plenty of things, right? The air you're breathing, clean air, that's something. I mean, without it, you know, spend some time underwater for a while. You appreciate air real quick. So it just takes a little more effort, but it's totally worth it. It's totally worth it. All right, just want to see any final things. I am trying to wrap this up. Where's my Coke? People want to know. It's right here. My parents have been saying for years they wish they never had me. So thank you for everything so I could give you a big hug. It's funny because I said the opposite to my parents, you know, one of those, I never asked to be born. I didn't ask to be here. But it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what you want or what they want, because you're here. So that's irrelevant. It doesn't really matter. I mean, they're words. Don't let it get to you. They're just words. And you can choose to see a positive side to that too. You might think, well, what's the positive side of my parents saying, I wish I'd never been here? The positive side is that your parents are being, the positive side of it is that you can recognize that you're not going to be like that when you get older. You can make it a mission in your life that because that happened to you, you want to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else. You know, I have friends who had parents that were alcoholics, and some of those friends became alcoholics. Some of those friends won't touch a drink of alcohol, never, because of what they saw their parents do. My parents always drank coffee and smoked cigarettes. I don't smoke and I don't drink coffee. Why? Because it reminds me of my parents. Not that they were bad people, but I just didn't want to grow up to be like them. And so these are the motivations we have in life that help make us better people. Sometimes these challenges that we overcome are the reason why we are the people we are today, right? When I mentioned to you, a lot of people say I have a calm voice, and I tell you I was raised in a very chaotic environment with parents yelling and screaming and slamming doors. Because of that, I'm not like that. So perhaps if I had parents like me, maybe I would have grown up to be the other way, right? Who's to say? But it certainly has made an impact in my life that it's something I think about, and it's something I work very hard to avoid. And if I get upset and I lose my temper, I get very mad at myself, very hard on myself. And I think no matter what anybody tells you that's insulting or degrading or disparaging, it has very little impact compared to the insults and the disparaging comments we do to ourselves. So that's the first thing you need to fix, because you can't fix them, but you can fix you. Al McDonald has contributed $20 to the podcast. Thank you, Al. I appreciate that. I only use alcohol to clean electronics, not to drink it. Do you think suicide should be illegal? Well, it's kind of hard to enforce, isn't it? Enforcing a law against suicide is really just quality control. Because if you succeed at it, what's the punishment? So they only punish you if you weren't successful. That's quality control. It's a pretty stupid law. But you should have enough consideration for the people who know you and the people who care about you. So whether that's friends, family, what have you. Some of us were born with a pretty crappy deal with our folks, or one parent or the other parent. You have, at some point when you reach 18 years old, it's now your life, and you can't blame anybody anymore. It's up to you to make it better. Get yourself away from people that bring you down. If your parents are bringing you down, get away from them. The best thing you can do is move. Find a way to move very far away and start over and create the life you want to have. Don't expect anybody to do it for you. And it's expensive, and you might have to sell things you really like, and you might have to sacrifice things, but do it for yourself. For me, I've mentioned before, I want to go back to Michigan. I mentioned before, I'm not happy in Arizona. I would be happier somewhere else. It's very expensive. It's very difficult this late in life to do that move. But at the same time, there's plenty of people my age that can do it. I can do it too, and I will eventually get there. I have to do it. It's got to be very planned out, very carefully. And when you see me broadcast from my place in Michigan, you will see I'll be a new person. I'll be so much happier. And I just can't do it tomorrow. You know, there's a certain amount of patience you have to have. You got to have that willpower, be stubborn, and do what you need to do. Don't expect anybody to do it for you. And you will create exactly what you want. Thanks to all the people in the chat, and Carrie, it's nice to have a rare, genuine good talk like this on the internet. Thank you, John. Carrie, have I read a boss like Bill Lumbergh? No, but I had a job like was that Initech or something they would call that? An office, the movie Office Space, one of my favorite movies. It was just like working at Intel. Just like working at Intel. In the 90s. I don't know what it's like working at Intel today. Why do I not like Arizona? Is it the heat? It's a little bit of the heat, but mostly it's the people that live here. There's a culture. Like if you go to Alabama, there's a certain culture in Alabama. If you go to England, there's a certain culture of the people in England. If you go to Mexico, there's a certain culture of the people in Mexico. And even within the United States, there's a culture in Texas. It's very, Texas pride. There's a culture in the Midwest. And I was brought up in the Midwest. I was brought up in Michigan. And there's a culture there that does not exist in Arizona. And because I was brought up with it, I prefer it. And despite I'm still in the United States, people behave very differently towards each other. They're very rude. It's very much people are in a bubble. And if you can stand right in front of somebody and they don't see you. In Michigan, overall, I mean, there's always bad parts of town and there's always bad people. But in Michigan, the general culture is much friendlier and more considerate to each other. People are much more friendly. And I love always, when I go back to Michigan, I always love it. Chicago, people are even friendlier. Of course, there's a bad part of Chicago, but in the, the popular part of Chicago that, the millennial, what is that called? The beam, the Millennium Beam, what is it called? Anyway, in the touristy areas, Navy Pier, even when you go like down Michigan Avenue, everybody's so friendly and the city is so clean. We have people, I have neighbors that they eat fast food in their car and then they throw the bag out in the street. And they don't just do it once. Every time I go to my mailbox, and by the way, I hate that too. I hate having to walk out to my, in Michigan, the mailbox was attached to your house. Here, I've got to walk all the way down the block. And it's like every other day, there's a different amount of trash from a fast food place in the same place. Like the trash can is 10 feet away. You can't get off your butt and put the trash in, and their yard is a huge mess. It's like, you want to live in a landfill? Do you want to live? I don't want to live in a landfill. If you want to, you go right ahead, but please don't turn my neighborhood into a landfill. People dragging shopping carts home and then leaving the shopping carts. That's illegal, but the city has no rules to enforce the owner of the shopping cart to pick it up. It's on a voluntary basis. And if I touch it, I'm attributing to theft, so it's illegal for me to move it. So it contributes to what is like a landfill effect. And then there's just an overall culture of rudeness, people revving engines up and down the street at 2 o'clock in the morning in a residential neighborhood where people are sleeping and have to get up for work in the morning without any consideration. And again, this happens anywhere you go, but it happens a lot. It's like a regular, normal daily thing here. And I'm just tired of it. I'd rather go live somewhere less crowded, where people aren't fighting for space and competing and jockeying for position with their cars on the freeway and just constant competition. Much rather live somewhere where people will help each other, and that's more of a small town thing. And there are small towns in Arizona where that does exist, but for me to go back where the whole state is mostly like that, not just the little town, Michigan is like that. And it's interesting to me because I run into people and I'll get to talking to them and I just like them. And I, for whatever reason, you like somebody, and then it'll come up that, oh, I'm from Michigan. Well, that explains why I like you. I couldn't explain it before. So there's a cultural aspect that I was raised with that doesn't exist where I live now as an adult that I strongly desire to go back to. Would you live in LA or New York? No, I've lived in California. It's very crowded, very expensive. It's the same problem. It's even worse in California. Michigan is more crowded? No, Michigan is not crowded at all. No. Phoenix, LA, New York, San Diego, Boston, Chicago, those are crowded places. Michigan is not crowded. I would never move back to California. Nowhere in California is appealing to me. Tucson is better than Phoenix. I don't like Tucson. It's very dirty and old. The people might be a lot nicer there, but it's just old and dirty. I just don't like Tucson at all. Could be worse. You could live in New Jersey. I'd rather live in New Jersey than New York. You should come to Surprise, Arizona. People here are nicer. I've spent a lot of time in Surprise, and it's all the same. People in Surprise are the same. Go to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil? Yeah, I wish. Come to Vancouver, Canada. I would love Vancouver. Canadians are great people. Have you ever found yourself standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona? Nope. Winslow's a little tiny town in the middle of nowhere, and if it wasn't for that Eagles song, no one would have ever heard of it. I live in Ohio, nothing to do here. Well, I don't know what to tell you. When would you move to Michigan? As soon as I can afford it and make it happen. Probably a couple years. All right, guys, I think that's going to wrap it up. Covered a lot of stuff here today. And someone's asking me where in Michigan. I don't care where, anywhere. If I had the option to buy a cabin in the woods, like in Roscommon in northern Michigan, that would be great. If I lived in a suburb like Canton or Farmington Hills, I think I'd be very happy there as well. People are the same everywhere you go. Well, that may be true. It may be a case of the grass is always greener kind of attitude, but I can tell you every time, without fail, that I go back to Michigan, I never want to come home. The food is better, the people are nicer. Remember, I was brought up there, so it was defined at a very young age if this was what's normal. And then as a teenager moving to Phoenix, everything's very different. So to go back to what's familiar may be the ultimate attraction for me. It may be the people are an excuse that may or may not actually exist, but to me it does. It may be the familiarity is what I'm really drawn to. All right, guys. Well, thanks again for watching. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Time to make dinner. You guys have a good evening. Thanks for joining me tonight. I'll see you all again very, very soon. Until then, bye for now.